is there a new calendar update for this one?
No, everything's the same. Maybe try restarting your computer.
Yeah. Yeah, it won't. It will not open. Yeah, I'll do that next. But I'll stay on the phone until I get there.
Sounds good. Good luck. Morning, Commissioner Sky.
Yeah, I can.
Good morning.
This conference will now be recorded.
Good morning.
Morning. Morning.
Good morning. Good to see everybody. So there was a lot of things uploaded this morning and changed this morning and then uploaded. So I think we got the from the Market Development Committee, we had a change, right, Manuel, on one of the recycling market development focus document, and then one on the food waste. So I've uploaded both of those, and also the American Chemistry Council response letter that we sent them this morning. And we have a big long letter from LA County, so hopefully you guys have seen that, because we'll talk about that today. And Ted, we didn't really make any changes to that report, did we?
No, not much. I added the one section on food waste, and I added that also to the one you had just uploaded. So that's in green, so everybody can see that.
Oh, good, because that's what came out of last meeting, so that did get in there.
It did.
Perfect. Thanks. Sorry, it's been a little...
No, it's a big juggle.
That is for sure. And on top of it, my computer has decided to go on the fritz, so I get printouts like this. So I cannot see my notes that I normally would have in front of me right now for housekeeping. And I know Laura is going to have to leave early because they're doing a big meeting today at the Capitol about how COVID's impacted our industry, so we will not have her for the entire time. Let's see, how many people do we have? There's Jeff.
Looks like Commissioner Snyder's on, but we're not seeing her.
Chair Sanborn. This is Ann Schneider. I'm going to have to leave at 11. I sent you an email, but if your computer's down, just leaving at 11.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. Well, I've got my notes are not printing for some reason. So, all right. It looks like we've got a quorum, and we are at, it looks like 8:31. So I will go ahead and call the meeting to order. Welcome, everybody. This is the last meeting of the commission before Thanksgiving. This is our 10th meeting. So good morning to the commissioners, CalRecycle, and the public. So we have, again, our 17-member commission, and I want to thank everybody who's been working, again, so very hard. All the commissioners, our Vice Chair Valle, Commission, and the CalRecycle staff and stakeholders. We've received a lot of comments, and we really appreciate the comments from the public. They're very helpful. We are still at the National Stewardship Action Council recording this meeting and posting it later to our YouTube page. And the reason we do that is because CalRecycle cannot post them very quickly. They will provide you with copies of video from any of the committee meetings as well, but you have to ask for them. So again, commissioners, please use the asterisk in the chat box so that we can know who is next. And if I miss anybody, please also let me know. It's very easy to do while I'm trying to look at all the little squares of heads and documents. On public comments, again, we are not going to read any of the public comments at the meeting that have been submitted in writing and posted on the website. All of them are referred to committees which respond to those comments. And only the comments read at this meeting are those submitted live during the agenda items. Please keep them focused and clear on what you would like us to do and what your policy recommendations are, and to no more than 1 minute or 150 words. And the commissioners are free to respond live to comments heard under agenda items, but not those under item number 3, which are comments to things that are not on the agenda, meaning they weren't noticed and the public would not have an opportunity to know that they were being discussed. So we are getting close to having our recommendations ready for our first and second readings in December for the first submittal of the report of the draft policy recommendations going to the legislature January 1st. So this is literally our last meeting where we'll be able to discuss things before the final words have to be on the page for the December, was it 2nd meeting? For our first reading in the report, and then second reading December 16th. And then that would be our last meeting of the year, and that our draft report would go over to the legislature and CalRecycle and Cal EPA. Again, we've also used Google Docs as a way to provide transparency to the public. Every document I've received from committee chairs has been posted as of this morning before the meeting, so everybody can follow along, including PowerPoints and proposals and language. That is listed on the CalRecycle webpage, in addition to what they post because of the accessibility requirements. So again, you can follow the commission's work, go into the CalRecycle Commission page and just click on commission meetings and you can get on the listserv. So with that, I think we'll go ahead and start with agenda item number 1, which is our call to order and roll call. So I will go ahead and call the roll call. And I'm sorry, because my notes didn't print. I have to go off old notes. We will start with Commissioner Bouchard. You here? Yeah.
Present.
And Commissioner Cadena? Are we missing her? Okay. Commissioner Davis?
I am here.
Great. And Commissioner Dell, I see you. The early bird. Commissioner Dunleavy?
Here.
You saw him. Great, thank you. Commissioner Ferrante, and I know you have to leave early, right? Commissioner Ferrante? I know she's here. I can see her, but I think her bandwidth is a little low or something. Okay, well, I can see her. And then Commissioner Kalpakoff?
Here.
Commissioner Lapis? Is he on? Can somebody text Commissioner Lapis and see if he's coming? That'd be great, thanks. And the same with Commissioner Cadena. Commissioner Medrano, I think I saw you. I heard a quiet here, okay. Commissioner Osagura? Is he missing? Okay, I guess he's missing as well. Commissioner Potashner?
Here.
Great, thank you. Myself, then Commissioner Schneider,
Present.
present, and Commissioner Sky.
I'm here.
Great, thank you. And Commissioner Toyota.
Here.
Good to see you. And Commissioner Valle. I saw him. Great. And Ward. I saw Commissioner Ward. Great.
Hello.
All right. So we've got almost everybody, but I know Commissioner Ferrante was having trouble, and I think she popped off, but she said she'd be on early and then come back later because of that hearing going on at the Capitol about what is going on with COVID and the impacts on the industry.
Commissioner Sanborn, I also have to speak at that hearing, so I'll be breaking off between 10 and 10:45.
Okay, very
Now
good.
we
Thanks for letting us know. All right, well, they don't coordinate with us when they make these calendars, so we just make do, that's for sure. Okay, thank you. And then we'll move on then to agenda item 2, review and potential approval of the meeting notes. And I want to thank the Cal Recycle staff because I thought they did a nice job of really trying to document all the decisions that were made. So thank you for doing that. Did anybody have any amendments to the meeting minutes or a motion?
Move to approve.
And who was that? I'm
Bouchard.
sorry. Oh, great. Thank you, Commissioner Bouchard. Is there a second?
Commissioner Sky, I'll second.
Great, thank you. Everybody give a thumbs up if you approve the meeting minutes as written. Great, thumbs up, John. Great, and Valle, everybody's good. Okay, so we've got, let's see, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, we've got the quorum, so we're good. Thank you very much for approving the meeting minutes. Okay, so we will move on to agenda item 3, the public comment review for items not on the agenda. And I first will turn it over to Cal Recycle. Are there any public comments right now for items that are not on the agenda?
Yes, there was 2 long comments, so it's part 1 of 2 from Los Angeles County Solid Waste Management Committee / Integrated Waste Management Task Force from Ms. Margaret Clark. So I will only read the first 500 words. Sorry, is it 500 or 150?
150.
150, okay. So, Task Force Letter, Part 1 of 2, Assembly Bill 1583, Statewide Commission on Recycling Markets and Curbside Recycling, Request for Policy Proposals, the Los Angeles County Solid Waste Management Committee / Integrated Waste Management Task Force, supported Assembly Bill 1583, which created the Statewide Commission on Recycling Markets and Curbside Recycling to, among other things, by January 1st, 2021, issue policy recommendations to achieve specified market development goals and waste reduction goals, and provide regular feedback to the Department of Resources, Recycling, and Recovery. Cal Recycle.
Yeah, I know this is a very, very long letter, and I think this is just the first paragraph, so thank you for starting it. I guess if I just highlight to the commissioners, this is a very long letter. It was very thoughtfully put together by the LA County Solid Waste Management Committee, and it had a conclusion page on page 10 with 10 recommendations. So a lot of these, they actually outline where the commission has started these discussions. So I will leave it up to the committee chairs to discuss, you know, are you addressing these already? Are there other things to discuss with their recommendations on those items? And make sure that we incorporate this very thoughtful letter. And I would say, I think for letter C on EPR, including organics, textiles, beverage bottles, and batteries, I think that's something Ted and I would take up. Is that correct, based on what we've discussed before? And Ted and I had a whole lot of stuff going on the last 2 weeks, so we did not make huge amounts of progress on the report, but I can promise you next week I've set aside 3 days of time to really work on the report and have it really buttoned up for your consideration at the next meeting and first meeting in December. But if that's okay with you, Commissioner Ward and I will take up the item on C, which is on page 4 of that letter regarding EPR, some of the hazardous waste, some of those oddball things that weren't nicely fitting into a committee. If anybody has any problem with that, let us know. Okay. And if there's anybody who would like to discuss.
Chair Sanborn?
Yes.
As a note, those two comments are published, so they're visible to everybody.
Right. Everybody can see them, and I uploaded this letter to the Google Docs as well, so everybody should be able to see it. So if you have any comments or questions on this or where these conversations should be, let us know. But I know the Vice Chair and I can go through this very carefully and make sure everything's being addressed in a committee at some place. Okay. They submitted it on the 16th of November. Okay, and I want to, again, thank the LA Task Force. This is a very thoughtful letter. Is there anything else on that? And Commissioner Sky, I know you're from LA County. You might have been there when they were discussing this. Is there anything else we should know or suggestions on how to handle this?
Thank you. I just appreciate the different committees taking up those recommendations. LA County Public Works serves on that committee, but it is independent of the county. So it really represents industry, public agencies, private sector, and other stakeholders in solid waste from the entire county of LA. So there was a lot of thought and a lot of different voices that went into preparing that letter. So hopefully it is helpful. It definitely does reinforce some of the work that the Commission is already doing. So hopefully it serves to assist all of you in the work that you're doing.
I can say that since one of the discussions that we had last meeting was that the Vice Chair and I reach out and come up with some proposals on lithium-ion batteries, since that's one of the issues raised in this letter, that we have reached out to Call to Recycle to discuss with them what they might suggest that we do on lithium-ion batteries. And we commit to having some sort of a proposal with language to you by next committee meeting or next commission meeting so that you can consider it. If anybody wants to weigh in on that, let us know. But obviously this is a very important issue for the hauling industry right now and the entire system because of all the fires that we're seeing. And it's timely. So I just want to give you an update on that. Okay, and let me see. I see a couple of comments here. Commissioner Dunleavy, are you first, or is it Commissioner? Yeah, Commissioner Dunleavy, did you want to say something? No? Okay. Commissioner Ward?
Mr. Dunleavy asked that the letter be sent to him, but I think it's available. I appreciate the task force letter. I think the item number 1 regarding the SB 1383 deadlines would probably go to the Organics Committee. I agree the item number 3 on EPR is best handled by you, Chair Sanborn and myself. And then item number 4 regarding reuse and repair, we'll move that to the source reduction with Commissioner Schneider.
And then the arm disease and those sorts of things, the permitting, that's all being handled by market development. The one I didn't know where it would go was this suggestion about recognizing and supporting renewable natural gas and the new low NOx engines as a leading strategy in reducing greenhouse gas emissions and achieving carbon neutrality. That seems a little out of our scope, but maybe Kobe, you could speak to that.
I think it's most relevant to the Organics Committee because it's a mechanism to encourage diversion of organic waste to create just one more pathway to keep that out of the landfills.
Commissioner Potashner is not on today. Is the Vice Chair? I'm sorry, I can't remember.
I'm here.
Oh, great.
I'm here, by the way.
Great, thank you. Okay.
I'm driving, so I don't have you on. I'm not on camera.
The year of COVID, everybody's remote.
Fine for us to take that up in terms of looking at.
Sir, you were cutting out, but I think you said it was okay to take it up in organics.
Yep, that's what I heard.
Okay. And then there was another comment at the end, number 10. The fund the needed recycling infrastructure and services, including prioritizing GGRF funds for the most effective, cost-effective greenhouse gas emission strategy for recycling. That seems like half funding, half recycling. Is that a recycling committee, or is that a separate thing that Ted and I should look at for the report? Any thoughts on that? Commissioner Lapis or Kobe?
Just very briefly, I think the charge was for all of the proposals to ensure that there was a funding component to it. So I think it's something the recycling committee could take on. And then when it comes up to our level, it could be further polished by you, Chair, and the commission as a whole.
Recycling committee will take that up for consideration. Okay. Very good. Well, thank you again to the task force for that very thoughtful comment. Commissioner Lapis, did you want to say anything? Commissioner Lapis?
Sorry. Yeah, this was on the lithium-ion batteries. Heidi said you're going to work with Ted on a recommendation. As I think you know, we're working with Rethink Waste and CPSC on legislation around this issue. So I would love to work with you if you and Ted are the two members, then if you could schedule a time with Rethink and with Doug to talk about what we've been discussing.
Actually with the vice chair, Valle and I.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay. Well, I mean,
whoever, I don't need to be part of the conversation, but I just want to make sure that the conversations we've been having with Doug and with the folks at EEC are incorporated.
No, absolutely. So the first thing. Okay.
I'm wondering if it might be more effective to have Commissioner Lapis work directly with with Chair Sanborn on that one.
Well, I mean, I think having a hauler who's had 2 fires in the last 2 weeks might be important too. So here's my suggestion is that as the vice chair and I, because this is a really important issue and it's very timely, I think, is to, and I've been working on batteries, as you all know, for about 10 years, so it's not like this is a new concept, is to reach out. We're going to have a call with Call to Recycle. We'll find out what we can from them about what they think the industry can support. We'll turn around and then we'll meet with the people who are working on legislation. I also share a lobbyist with CPSC, so this is not a new situation. And we would have a conversation with them. And therefore, because otherwise, if we do it as Commissioner Lapis instead of the person helping sponsor the bill Lapis, then we still have to be careful about the rules. So
I totally agree. And Heidi, I think you were the former sponsor of this bill as well. So I absolutely do not need to be involved. I just want to make sure that, the conversations that Jason and Kayla have been having with us are part of your conversation.
Absolutely. So we'll be touching base with all of them. If there's other people you think we need to touch base with, but I definitely had them right up number 2 after talking to the industry to see what they would be willing to support and where they're at.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, thanks so much. And then there's I believe, Commissioner Schneider.
Just a comment on lithium batteries. Talking to my surgeon yesterday, they're all putting in lithium batteries in their cars, backup for a short-term power checkoffs. So just want you guys to think that we're going to have a whole new flood of larger lithium batteries unless these corporations are doing take back.
Okay, thank you. And I think we have a public comment.
Yes, we have a comment from Our Planet, Robert Daviduk, and here it goes. November 9, 2020. Dear Commissioner Sanborn, thank you for the opportunity to present at the October 23rd meeting of the Recycling Committee of the Statewide Commission on Recycling Markets and Curbside Recycling. Our Planet Earth, Green Impact, Bonduelle, Fresh America's, Ready Pack Foods, and the California Strawberry Commission were pleased to report on the progress being made to increase the recycling of PET thermoform packages. The PET thermoform package, thermoforms in California, has a rich history of using post-consumer resin recycled bottles as its primary source of raw material. Now the packaging industry and brand owners are making commitments to transition from the use of recycled bottles to recycled thermoforms for direct food contact packaging. The first orders are being made now, as we are already seeing about a 10 million pound increase in the recycling of thermoforms. Of course, we have a long way to go to achieve 75% diversion from California landfills, but action is being taken. The comment continues on, and it has been published.
Yes, we've seen that. Thank you for that. And I guess I would just turn it over to the chair of the recycling committee. I know you've all taken this up. Is there anything else you want to say to them, or any proposals coming out of the committee that we should consider on this issue? Or I know that. Yeah.
No, we've heard from them. Their efforts are definitely very good. Fixing the formula within the CRV program will help them, but I don't know long term if it will provide the supply that they're looking for. It's a market issue where the MRFs are limited on the number of sorting spots they have in the facilities, and then the price that they're willing to pay for the material. So we can address the formula issue, but the facilities will have to figure out if they can or have space within their facilities to sort the material at the value that they're willing to pay for it. So it's going to take some time to figure this out. The first step will obviously be fixing the formula within the bottle bill that would not allow the MRFs and the curbside programs to include the thermoforms in the PET bales and get paid CRV for that material. So it will take some time.
Okay, and I'm hearing there's quite a few of them actually in those bales. Commissioner Valier, did you want to speak to this?
Yeah, I did. Thank you. As Chair Donlevy reported, our facility, we have 70,000 square feet of space, and we can't find space for thermoforms because everything we do is shipped by the ton, not by the pound, by the ton. And that kind of material, to sort it, separate it, and then let it sit until you have a ton so you can bale it, would take up, just occupy too much space. And there's no economic incentive for us to do that. The problem, I think, is labeling. The issue is that the public's perception is it looks like PET. It is PET. And so they do bring it in with a lot of their PET bottles for the buyback recycling center. And that causes severe problems for us because when we ship that material, it counts as contamination. And it severely depresses the value of our PET bales, which are pure, plastic bottles, which are CRV. So I just wanted to reinforce what the chair has already said. Thank you.
I think Heidi's muted.
Oh, sorry, Commissioner Davis.
You were calling on me. Yeah. So our MRF in Victorville is one of them that recovers the thermoforms and ships them to our planet, as was mentioned, I think, during the committee presentation. And it's actually part of the optical sort, so they're coming off with the bottles, as Commissioner Valle just described. And then we're always trying to make a bottle bale that is clean enough for food grade bottle remanufacturing. So the thermoforms become a contaminant, and I think with the passage of the increased post-consumer content for plastic beverage containers, that's probably going to be a larger issue going forward. I understand the storage and the baling issues, but we've been able to work around that. It does take a while to make thermoform bales and certainly ship a load, but nonetheless, they are a contaminant on the bottle bale, and I think with the recycled content, it's just another factor to consider. that may change the supply as you go forward. So thank you.
Marcus?
One of the things we discussed at the last commission meeting, or I'm sorry, a recycling committee meeting, was that we are going to develop pretty clear guidelines for what manufacturers need to do to stay on the list or be added to the list. Because there are a couple products that are sort of in this category, same as PET thermoforms, of
Mom,
not meeting,
when you get a chance.
of not meeting the current statutory requirements of being recyclable, but wanting to make the investments to get there. And we're going to lay out what that would look like. That's something we committed to doing. We haven't done it yet.
I can tell you, I was talking to a legislative staffer about the commission work, just in a general conversation.
I had
They
one
made
till
a
August. I don't
suggestion
know where
that,
I put it. Do you
is
have one
there
that's
somebody
supposed to
that
be-
needs to mute?
Hey,
the-
Ann, you're unmuted.
One of their suggestions was, because they had heard the conversation about that betweeners, you know, they're not totally out, but they're getting close to hitting the targets, is to allow companies to maybe call them the product recyclable if they submit a stewardship plan on how they're going to get to 75% within a year, and it's approved by Cal Recycle, which allows them a path to, you know, getting the material back so they can achieve those rates without being penalized. And I see a thumbs up from Kobe. If anybody else thinks that's a concept worth discussing at the committee level, thumbs up from Commissioner Valle. See, so if there's anybody else that thinks that's an idea, it might be a way to help, because right now they're either not in, they're kind of almost there, or they're in, but being a % short leaves them with the situation where they can't call themselves recyclable, which means nobody's going to put it in the recycling bin. And then it's this negative feedback loop instead of a positive feedback loop. So we have to find a pathway for them to get to the next level, whatever that is. But I thought that was an intriguing idea, and I won't take credit for it. So anyway, that was an idea that the committee could discuss as well. Okay, so on thermoforms, I would also, I just have to wonder if there's a pilot that they could be working on with a specific hauler, because as Commissioner Valle mentioned, there's very specific problems that they're having with room and space and how to market them, and maybe that's something that group could look at, is doing real pilots with real haulers to make sure that they come up with something that works. Okay, well, that's another comment that we got. From Cal Recycle, are there any other comments that you have received?
That is it for now.
Okay, so I will just say on the previous comments, I did send an email, a letter from the Vice Chair and I to Tim Shestek and the ACC and their folks today in response to their original letter. We had spoken to them the day, I think just days after they sent it, and we talked about it at the last meeting. We finally got it off to them, but I did want to ask Cal Recycle, one of the suggestions they made, which I've heard from many other people, is that it would be really nice to be able to do a back and forth with the commission and some of the commenters if we would like. And I did see yesterday at the Cal Recycle meeting, I think it was the second meeting, public meeting, where you were able to allow the public to speak their comments to the Cal Recycle staff and have a back and forth. Is there a possibility that we can do that at the commission in the upcoming meetings?
Heidi, this is Paulina. That's something that I'll have to check with my management team on, and we can circle back with you.
Okay, because I just got a text from Zoe that she's actually testifying at the COVID-19 hearing as well. So, okay, well, she'll look into it, and hopefully we can get that, because I do think that that's really going to be important, especially as we get down to the nitty-gritty of some of these really tough policy discussions. And I think we've got a couple of commenters here. Is Commissioner Ward, are you next?
Commissioner Donlevy was first.
I don't have him on there. I see Nick and then you.
No. Go ahead and move on.
Okay, is everybody good? All right. So the American Chemistry Council was one, and the other one was regarding aerosols. And we have asked for some more information, if they've got any more information about, you know, the recycling rate for aerosols in California, any incentives. Oh, Commissioner Oseguera, welcome.
Thank you. I had computer difficulties this morning, so I apologize.
You're not alone. My printer's on the fritz as well, so good company. So yeah, I think that we're going to continue to follow up with them, but I'm not sure they have, I mean, we just want to talk more with them. So Vice Chair and I will continue to work with the aerosols group to figure out if there's, and I've connected them with the MRF over in Roseville, because when I was there years ago, Roseville was collecting the aerosols. They had 2 different staff at all shifts working with 2 totally separate balers. They had to puncture everything and empty them and crush them, and it was very expensive and time consuming. And I've suggested they talk directly to that MRF that has had that issue and how much it costs them to deal with their products, so that they could get a better handle on it. I also mentioned that in the paint programs in Canada, they take aerosol paints. Ours is not taking aerosol paints, and I asked them if they would talk to Paint Care about it. I've actually emailed Paint Care and did not get a response. I don't know if Jeremy's out there and it got lost in cyberspace somewhere, but we'd love to know if Paint Care is interested in taking on at least the spray paint aerosol cans, which would be an existing program that's working pretty darn well, and maybe we could add that product into that category and have it dealt with. And that would at least help solve some of the problem. So, and that's something the recycling committee could take up as a recommendation if you're interested. All right, well, unless there's any other public comments that we want to reflect on, or we can go ahead and move on. All right, so we'll move on to agenda item number 4. Discussion and possible adoption of policies on the Basel Action Network. And this was this, oh, and I did want to mention on this, the CalRecycle meeting yesterday, the public recycling rate for 2019 was announced. And I'm not sure if you're all aware, so I just want to say it to the public as well. But we were supposed to be at 75% this year according to law. We have literally regressed to 37%. We are now less than half of the way to the goal we were supposed to be meeting this year. If that does not underscore the importance of the recommendations of this commission, I don't know what will. So anyway, I wanted to make sure that was out there. So for the Basel Action Network, we were supposed to address our second reading of the policy proposals and the suggestions that were provided by Commissioners Lapis and Valle. So I can turn it over to Commissioner Valle or Lapis, and then also it looks like we have a comment from Commissioner Dell.
What are we supposed to be doing today procedurally, since we went into detail on the last call?
It's up to you. I mean, do you want us to just reflect on it's really just a second reading. It could be a consent. It could say, does anybody have any thoughts or comments once they've reread this language? We can put the language back up just to make sure everybody's really comfortable with it and doesn't have any last amendments. Fortunately, you did this early, so we still have time to edit it and keep it in the January 1 recommendations. Commissioner Valle?
Yeah, I just want to be real clear that we heard the Basel presentation by Mr. Puckett, and the commission had a lot of questions. One of the items post that presentation was what specifically did we want to adopt from the Basel Convention as a commission. And then we put together I think it was 4 or 5 items in front of the entire commission. And so we presented it at the last meeting for adoption and consideration. And then we also wanted to be considerate of the public input and then feedback from the commissioners. Commissioner Oseguera had questions about the legality of the Basel Convention, potentially in California, in the United States. I spoke to Mr. Puckett about that item and the way that other countries have handled that. Legislatively, when they adopt those restrictions, or whatever they are, those policies, the legislative branch of their government then implement whatever is required to enforce restrictions on imports, exports, etc. So it's a complicated way of saying there are methods that have been proven to be successful in other countries. And it should be pretty straightforward if the legislation comes forward. So that's as much information feedback that I had on that question. As I recall, the other element was that we wanted to hear from the public about those recommendations, and that's why we wanted to bring it back for public view and then have it out there. I think it's been out there for a number of weeks, and unless we've heard something other than what we've discussed already, I think the recommendation from the recycling committee, correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff, is that we're putting this forward, or no, actually, no, this came to the full commission, not to the recycling committee, forgive me. So the recommendation is that we adopt these and push these forward as one of our policy recommendations in January.
Great summary. And Commissioner Dell, I think we might have missed you. Did you want to say something? Yeah?
No, that's perfect timing. Actually, I'd like to support what Commissioner Valier just said, and then also give the latest statistics on what's happening in California in September of 2020. That's the latest statistics that are available. They were just published by the U.S. Trade Bureau, part of the Department of Commerce. California exported 8.2 million kilograms of plastic waste to non-OECD countries. And those are the countries that under the Basel Amendment on January 1st will say, no, thank you. We don't want contaminated waste. You'll have to get prior informed consent. Included in that 8.2 million is 3.3 million kilograms of plastic waste to Malaysia, which includes 1.3 million kilograms of PVC. PVC will not be allowed at all. So as of end of September, just 3 months before the Basel Amendment is going to start, California is still exporting a lot of plastic waste. Now, maybe the plan is to stop the ships or not load anything, but the trend's not looking that way. So we actually really do need to take action. My group's done a survey. There's 76 MRFs in the state, and based on our survey, 13 of those owned by Waste Management and Republic Services have made public commitments to not export residential plastic waste outside of North America. That's only 17% of the MRFs, and so we've got that noted on the website. And so we'd really like to encourage other MRFs to also make that commitment that they'll respect the Basel Amendment. And I support the policy because California is still by far the largest exporter of plastic waste to non-OECD countries. Thank you.
Thank you for that. That's very helpful. Anybody else want to speak to this item? I don't see anything in the chat. Well, if there's no other comments, and we've given, are there any public comments from CalRecycle staff?
I'm in the chat.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Commissioner Kalkoff.
Yeah. So if we're going to move forward with a policy recommendation on the Basel that's going to not allow exports of plastics, I think we need, and I made this comment at the last commission meeting, but we need to look at the whole policy and how it affects local MRFs, local franchises. Again, if we're choosing a method of recycling over another, whether it's exporting plastics or not, we need to circle the whole policy together with CalRecycle with a recommendation on the diversion implications that local haulers, MRFs have with jurisdictions as well. Again, it's the landfilling of plastics versus exporting and recycling. What's the best use of that? If we're going to export plastics or recommend that, then there needs to be a diversion credit at some point for taking these to the landfill instead of recycling. So I think as part of the policy, it's got to be wrapped up as a whole with a recommendation on that as well.
Commissioner Lapis, were you next? Or Commissioner Valier?
Yeah, I'll say that the actual recommendation is about eliminating diversion credit, but not for export of all plastic. It's mixed materials. And so basically anything in violation of the Basel Convention. So you can still export mixed, you can still export PET, HDPE, and polypropylene. And it's also doesn't include Mexico and Canada. So it is fairly nuanced, but it's specifically getting rid of diversion credit for material that we think probably is not getting recycled. So I would stand by the recommendation as it is.
Okay, Commissioner Valle?
Commissioner Lapis cleared it up. He hit the nail right on the head. It's not meant to prohibit anything except material that is contaminated. It's pretty clear.
Okay, so you think it's clear enough to, all right. Is that to your liking, Commissioner Kapikoff? Because ultimately this will have to be a full commission consensus approval is the hope.
I won't support it today until I get feedback from the guys that I represent.
Okay. And Commissioner Dell?
Yeah, just to be clear, it's the Basel Amendment and the laws, the international treaty that we'd be respecting has a greatest focus on non-OECD countries. So that's Malaysia, Thailand, Vietnam, where 50% of plastic received is sorted in villages with child labor. And I think that after we've seen over 100 reports, including a major study recently out by Jambeck et al. And also Ireland that says up to 30% of plastic that's exported is actually ends up in the environment. I don't think we should equate the word export with recycled at this point because there is no traceability. So I support what Commissioner Lapis just said and what's been written, that the focus is on non-OECD countries, but this isn't just about contamination. No PVC will be allowed. That's what's in, because when PVC is burned, dioxin is emitted. But the way the policy recommendation is written, it's around non-OECD countries, and the exports to OECD countries, Taiwan, South Korea, Canada, Mexico, Turkey, Germany would still be allowed, which would be fair, and those are the major markets, and Canada, if I didn't say that.
And I want to be clear. I support the recommendation of not exporting contaminated products. So that's again, that's not what I'm saying at all. I think that the impact of local diversion requirements, where there are diversion mandates in some MRF contracts and some hauling franchises, and if we export a 2% contaminated bale or 3% contaminated bale, and 97% of it or 95% of it's getting recycled and the 5% that's not, what we're looking at doing is taking that entire bale and putting it in the landfill. So again, what does that look like on local diversion requirements? So that's my only hiccup here. Again, I do support the concept, so I want to make that clear.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Davis?
Yeah, actually, I see Commissioner Potashner has asked to comment, and I'd like to reserve mine until after he speaks.
Got it. Commissioner Potashner?
Sure. And can you hear me okay? I couldn't tell before. Yeah, okay. Just to follow up on what Commissioner Kapikoff is saying, and I think this issue is greater than just this issue around Basel. I think all the good work that the Recycling Committee is going to do and identify really a slimmed down list of what's recyclable. The percentage of the waste stream that is going to be truly recyclable after the work is done and the legislation is done there'll be a disconnect between that list and expectations from local franchises and local MRF contracts. I think the state needs to figure out a way to step in and create a pathway to sort of rectify that disconnection. I don't know what that is, but I think this is going to be an issue that our side of the industry is going to have to start dealing with after these policies get put into place.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I can remember working on a contract 20 years ago, and we put in a clause for different things like this happening that were out of the hauler's control to make sure that they wouldn't be held to standards that they couldn't meet because of something that changed that was out of their control. But I don't know if that's in all the contracts. And then Commissioner Davis, did you want to go after Commissioner
Yeah,
Potash?
I actually, I think both Commissioner Potash and I last time brought up the one small issue that mixed bales of PET, HDPE, and polypropylene are still permitted under the Basel Amendment. So, the document still excludes any mixed bales. It's maybe a small item, but I think we were hoping to get clarity on that from our last discussion. So maybe Mr. Lapis can help us.
Yeah, John, thank you. I do remember that. I thought you were going to make that change. Would you be able to make that change in the recommendation?
Yeah, I can suggest some language, and
Great.
I think it's on recommendation. It's part of recommendation number 3. If you're looking at the document, it now says the export of mixed plastic, except for bales of sorted single resin materials that have manufacturing end markets. Maybe after that, except for bales of sorted single resin materials, or mixed bales of allowable materials in a generic sense, or you could call it out, but it would just be that simple.
Would you like me to make that change, or do you want to make it?
Well, we can do it live too. We could have the cover cycle staff, if they've got the language, pull it up and then show everybody so we can all see it, and then that would be, we could vote on it. Well, actually, we didn't.
Yeah, I've got it on my screen. I've got it on my screen if you want.
Okay. Most of us are visual learners.
And just maybe a quick reminder, I'm probably not the only one who's having a hard time finding it in the Google Drive. Where would it be?
Oh, it wasn't put there by the... You guys have to put it in the boxes. I put in what I'm given and I ask everybody to upload, but I'm not seeing a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, I have it on Google Drive, but it's not in this committee meeting. So, are you seeing my screen?
Do we have a folder? We do, but do we, for everybody else who's following along at home, we have a folder of the most recent recommendations all in one place, or are we going back to former meeting folders?
Everything that's had a
this
first...
one came out of this one came from the November 4th commission meeting folder.
So I guess that's my question. Should we be updating old documents because people aren't going to know to go back and look at updates to former agenda? Or should we have like a folder that has all the standing work in progresses?
Well, we've asked the committee chairs to make sure that the commission folder is updated before every meeting on the stuff they wish to discuss. And I'm trying to do my best to help everybody get stuff in there. But it's a lot, so it would really help if the vice chairs can help the chairs make sure that everything from those committees that's going to be discussed at the commission meetings get into the folder. Ted has access to the folder. If you need help, he's also happy to help.
Would anybody object to me? Would anybody object to me making a folder under full commission that's work in progresses, and we'll move food recovery there, and we'll move this there?
Well, we could,
that's
certainly.
Too complicated. Because these are things that we've already approved. They've moved out of the individual committees.
Right, but when they've moved out of the committees with language, and they come to the commission, then that should just be in the open document for that commission meeting. Once it's first reading, it's read language in the actual report to be approved, and that report is in there, I believe.
And I, trying to make this easier, I created folders in each of the committees folders so that they could put the finished policies into those, and then I could clearly load them into the final document. So that was the intent.
So Ted, where would you recommend putting it? Sorry, not to belabor the logistics of this, but under recycling committee.
Exactly. The recycling committee recommendations folder?
I don't see a recommendations folder.
Anyway, so that's what we'll do. We'll do a recommendations folder for each committee, but it's up to, if it's come to the commission for discussion, it should go into the full commission folder for that meeting. Please, that would be very helpful.
Why don't we, under the full commission, just have a pending folder of things that are at the full commission that need to be added to the document that are works in progress?
Well, that's the same thing as having, we could certainly do that. It's all just putting it into one folder. So it's clear which documents are the policies that are coming.
And it would be an easy thing for everybody on the commission to go look like, hey, what's in the pending folder? What do I need to comment on? And then as things get moved to the document, they're in the document. Would that make sense?
Ted's on it.
Okay. So John, let's work on the version on your screen, but then we'll save it somewhere else afterwards.
Okay.
That's okay.
All right. Yeah, so I downloaded from Google Drive. So part of the problem is the documents in the commission folder are now protected, and only Heidi and Ted can add or edit. So I just, to be able to edit it, I downloaded it, opened it as Google Docs. So you should be seeing the Google Doc, or I'm sorry, a Word doc. So recommendation number 3 is where I'm pointed. And it now says, except for bales of sorted single resin materials, and I would suggest, or mixed bales. And there the language, Nick, is either of acceptable materials, or we call it out, which is HDD, PET, in polypropylene. I think
I'd rather call it out than argue about what's acceptable down the line.
Yeah. Okay, and it's that simple, I think. And I'll try to see if I can spell polypropylene. Okay. So it's that. I think that was the concern that Mr. Tashner and I had. That those mixed bales are allowed.
Yeah, no, that's a good catch. That was not intended.
Okay.
Is everybody okay with that language?
So I will save this.
Is there anybody who's not okay with this added change? Okay, Richard's 2 thumbs up, so I guess that's good unless everyone Ted's up. Okay. Well, then that would be the first reading for that change, but that could be, yeah, we could approve it to go into the report for the next meeting as read, and then turn it black whenever we do our second reading. Great, thank you.
I'm going to email this. I will email this to Mr. Valle and Lapis, because I can't add it back anywhere. I'm not sure they can, but we'll figure it out.
Okay.
Yeah, I can't. I think, can you send it to Ted?
That would be fine. I'd be happy to upload it.
And I noticed that thanks to somebody who's tipping me off, the pound sign is missing from recommendation number 4, just detail.
Oh, I'll do that one as well. Yeah, now I understand. I saw the comment.
Engineers, we want to keep everybody with us.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. So
Stop screen sharing.
basically then all agreed to those recommendations with that amendment, I think. But Commissioner Kalpakoff has to check with his management, correct?
Well, let me maybe make it clear. I do support the recommendation. I think there needs to be a bigger conversation, as Eric said earlier, of how we're going to measure diversion. If we're going to choose a method of diversion now, and CalRecycle's method of calculating it is based on non-disposal, and we're making a recommendation that exporting a mixed bale to a country that is only recycling half or whatever the number is not acceptable anymore, then that material is going to end up in landfill. So again, there needs to be a recommendation or a policy written on how maybe the new diversion calculation is going to happen, and what that looks like as part of the 15 items in the blue cart. non-exporting of mixed plastics. I think it's a bigger conversation to have, that we as a commission probably need to come up with a better mechanism of measuring diversion if we truly want a circular economy in California.
Okay. So measurement changes for diversion that would be recommended along with this recommendation of basically stopping credit for this other thing. So then I guess there's a couple commissioners that want to speak, but one of the thoughts I had is a two-person group of the commissioners that maybe Kapikoff and recall, Mr. Potashner, who are haulers who would have this problem and be very familiar with it, maybe coming up with some ideas for us to bat around at the next commission meeting is just one thought. But let's hear from some of the other commissioners. I think Commissioner Ward.
I agree. And from a local government perspective, where we've been told to try to implement these recycling programs, and this is how you do it, and this has been recycling, to come back with the news of all these materials that used to be counted as recycling are now going to count as disposal, and we don't have any mechanism by which we're going to be able to recycle them. They're all going to go to landfill. Is just a big heap of bad news. We need to figure out a way to realistically offer that bad news in a context of saying this is how we're moving forward in a positive way, because there are these big problems we're trying to address. And I agree, we need to tell that story in a most forthright way, because here we are, the Recycling Commission, and giving the bad news that we're not anywhere close to our goals, and we're going to take the first steps a little bit backwards, because that's what we need to do to get back onto the right path. And that is a hard story to tell. I'm open to how we go about doing it, but I just know it's not going to land very well, especially on local governments who are trying so hard to implement.
Commissioner Lapis.
Yeah, I think a lot of that conversation will happen in the legislature, and having worked on diversion credit for ADC for a long time, this is all very familiar, and those are conversations that are going to happen in the actual negotiation of policy. But I will say, I think it's not about, it's about being transparent and being honest, which I think is an existential need for us to keep our recycling programs. And I think Republic just did a survey that I read in Waste Dive or somewhere, where 25% of people, or maybe it's 24% of people, said that they are not recycling more because they don't trust that the material they're putting in their bin is actually getting recycled. And so reestablishing that public trust is really an existential threat for us.
I agree. And I think I skipped Commissioner Dell by mistake. Commissioner Dell?
Yep. Yeah, I support what Commissioner Lapis just said. I mean, here's the reality. We have to talk in terms of facts, okay? Think about if you go to your doctor. I mean, you want them to tell you what the truth is. Aren't we supposed to be here there's a reason this commission is happening, and that is because recycling is suffering, right? And so if we're supposed to be the ones who say this is recyclable, this isn't recyclable, then we can't sugarcoat it. We have to be told the truth. We have to tell the truth even if we're backtracking. Now, I'm going to volunteer to take the 15 item list and look at some waste characterization and say, okay, what percent of materials are actually recyclable? But this gets to the bigger discussion that Commissioner Kapikoff and Potashner just mentioned. How do you calculate diversion, right? Because I'm looking right now at the 2018 waste characterization report from CalRecycle, and there's a fraction of that which is municipal, right? And then there's floor tile and roof things and other things. But if I'd like an opinion of this commission, is that the best waste characterization to use, to take that waste characterization that says there's this much cardboard, etc., take our 15 item list, currently 15, and do an overlay and say, okay, of that waste, that's how much would actually be recyclable. Is that the best report or approach to use?
Any thoughts on that? I see Commissioner Davis is next, and maybe you could help answer that.
Yeah, I mean, the statewide waste characterization looks at materials and landfills, which I think are the potential to enter into the recycling stream. So if you combine, if you had a way to combine what's recovered and what's recycled, you'd have a grasp of 100% of the stream. We don't really have that yet. Maybe the 901 reporting will start to help with that. On the issue of this, what actually gets recycled and the focus on the impacts of the recommendation on export, that also occurs on domestic use. If bale purity is 1%, that's 1% that may not go to a landfill in California, but it's not actually recycled. Bale purity is all over the place. So we're going to be talking about this at length, but I'm always concerned that we try to do one size fits all, and the better MRF is at making a clean bale, the less they're sending off that ends up in a landfill somewhere else. So how do you distinguish that? If you say all bales are 95% of the state of material, that doesn't reward someone who hits the 1 to 3%. So I just wanted to, it's not just export. So if we're going to look at this question, let's look at it comprehensively. There are very few outside of the take-back programs and maybe some of the CRV shipments. There's probably very few bales that hit 100%, and we need to be cognizant of that if we're going to talk about it at all. It all rolls to the same effect, particularly with 901.
Okay, I'm going to do a time check. We were initially going to move on to our presentation by Assemblymember Susan Eggman. Unfortunately, she could not make it today, and I forgot to tell you that at the beginning because my notes didn't print out on my printer. So we have a few extra minutes that we can discuss this because I think it's really important. So we'll go on to Commissioner Valle, I think is next.
Back to Commissioner Dale's point, Cal Recycle was at our facility last week. They spent probably about 6 hours, and they were doing waste characterization based on 2 of our routes, and they had a very precise list, including a scale, and there were probably about 20 different items on that list. They do this once or twice a year, every year, not just here, but in several facilities, to get a sense of what is the character of the residential material that's being brought into MRFs. If, getting back to Commissioner Dale's point, overlaying the list of the items that we've identified with that list might be a good way to get right into the details of what is recyclable, what isn't recyclable, and then what are they capturing in that data. And I'm not sure where that data is stored at Cal Recycle, but I think it would be very helpful for us to look at that.
If I may, I think the question is, I don't know, I wasn't here when the first 50% diversion rate calculation was done, but we need to look at the whole waste stream of what would go into the waste bin and then the recycle bin, and of course there's composting too, right? And so it can't just be what's coming into the MRF. If we're gonna basically benchmark against the 50% diversion rate and see if it's realistic at all, and if communities are being forced into something that's not realistic based on market conditions, that's what we need to know. So Commissioner Davis had it right. We need to take the waste stream with the recycling stream and put it together. Is that combined waste stream data exist right now? Does anyone have any idea? I'll take it and overlay our recycle rate if that data exists.
Can we ask Cal Recycle staff, do you know if that data exists? I know it's on the fly. Maybe you can research it and then get back to us.
No, we would have to take a look and get back to you.
I think the closest thing to that, I'm not Cal Recycle staff, but having looked at a lot of this data, I think the closest thing to that would be the new 901 data, and when that gets reported, combined with the waste characterization study, but that's not been compiled anywhere.
Everybody's okay. Can we agree that it would be good to know that from CalRecycle, and we'll just do an official question here to get that information back from CalRecycle? Everybody's all right? All right. So CalRecycle, if you could let us know what data you have on that, that would be helpful. And Commissioner Potashner.
Sorry, one thing, just without that, we're all being hypothetical that this list changes a lot or doesn't change a lot. Literally, we're all being hypothetical without the data and the facts and looking at what's in, what's out. Then we're all just waving our hands without that.
Well, and when we do our reports, we should be, I think you've already directed us, and Ted and I are working on this language of really putting in context what time we've had available, what research and information we've had available, that all of our recommendations are being made within those limitations. So if we don't get more data, then we will just have to frame it that this is the best data available was this, and based on that information, we're giving this recommendation. If something else comes up and they decide it's useful, and then that's fine. Commissioner Potashner?
Yeah, thanks. It occurs to me, especially sitting on the Market Development Committee, where we're really just trying to find things around the edges to help spur end user, paper pulping, plastic flaking, and so forth, that this issue around export's always going to be a headwind that's going to be hard for California to overcome. While we're doing this for the Basel, over a longer horizon, it'd be good to understand if, and I don't know if CalRecycle could do this as a study or if we need to bring somebody else, if the recycling credit went away, say in 2040 or over a longer time frame for exports of all material types, what would that do in terms of spurring domestic infrastructure if we kept our mandates in place in terms of diversion? I don't know if that's something we can just ask CalRecycle if they have the ability to internally sort of project, or if that's something that it'd be worth actually getting, the legislature to fund a study for.
Okay, so then that's an official question, it sounds like, for CalRecycle, if they could look at what that would do at spurring, what could they do to spur internal markets if this really did get closed down and none of this was counted as diversion. So I guess CalRecycle, we're ticking off a list of things that at the end of the meeting, hopefully you can read back as far as data requests. Okay, so they're quiet because they're usually talking about requests as they come up. Okay, so now I think who is next? Commissioner Dell, did you want to say anything else to this? No? Okay, and then Commissioner Davis?
Yeah, I was going to mention the data request, but it sounds like we're going to circle back on that and having a presentation on waste characterization work. There are a lot of different formats and different ongoing studies, so that could be, and maybe waste characterization combined with the 901 reporting framework would help us begin to narrow in on this.
Well, I would make a suggestion.
I'm not sure when we want that.
Yeah, I would suggest at this point, if we're going to get good recommendations that we feel really good about January 1st, we're not going to have time for a deep dive on waste characterization studies and stuff. I would think that maybe a couple of commissioners might want to do the deep dive on that and report back to everybody if that was the case. But let's wait to see what CalRecycle can come back with on data. Does that sound okay?
And I just wanted to follow up briefly on Mr. Potashner's comment, and when we get to the committee reports, maybe I can touch on it. But the CalRecycle estimates about there's 2 million tons of paper fiber leaving California ports. They estimate about 80% of that is from in-state, from California. That's 8 million tons. The brand new paper pulping and paperboard facility that's going up in Utah, Greenfield project in Utah, is going to handle about 325,000 tons a year, about 1,000 tons a day over a working year. And that means that we would need somewhere between 20 and 25 similarly sized facilities just to handle the paper fiber that's generated and being exported out of California now. So the building that domestic infrastructure is great. Building 24 paper pulping facilities to handle our material is, we talk about the difficulty with 100 organics projects of 100 to 1,000 tons a day. That's another big hurdle, and we definitely need to focus on it. But it's a lot of those projects.
So I have one idea, and I'm willing to put the effort into doing it if the commission will think it's representative. The EPA publishes a Sustainable Materials Management Report for the whole country that is municipal waste, and includes waste that's the full amounts, and it goes type by type, right? And so it tells what type of plastic, what type of paper, and so on. So if we think that the nationwide kind of amounts are representative, because we're really looking at like what percent does our list cover, I could use the figures in the EPA report to do the assessment and say our list covers X amount. I'm willing to do the work if the commission would think it's worthwhile, but I don't want to do it and then have everyone throw rocks at it and say, oh no, that doesn't apply to California. So I'm putting that offer out there.
Anybody want to respond to that? I'm not sure if that's necessary.
Yeah,
that's up to you guys.
I would think probably not yet on that level of effort, just because I've seen pretty significant differences between nationwide waste characterizations and statewide. Plus, of course, we have an ongoing changing waste stream ourselves, the increasing amount of mail order, et cetera. So I would hold off on that level of analysis, though.
Is there anybody else want to weigh in on this? So we've got some data requests of CalRecycle. We've got an amended language for the Basel Convention recommendations, and we will hear those again at the next meeting. So we'll be putting those into the report, and it'll be the final reading, and we'll hear back from did we want to officially have Commissioners Kalbakoff and Potashner look at some suggestions on the diversion counting issue and come back with some suggestions or some thoughts on that? Anyone? Thumbs up. Is everybody okay? Yeah. They've been volunteered. Are you okay?
You can't see me, but my thumb's down right now.
Shall we pick someone else, Eric? Shall we pick Commissioner Zosegura or Valle, another hauler, or somebody?
No, I'll be all right. I'll take it. It's fine.
Vice Chair's like, no, I got enough. Okay, very good. So then if you guys could come back with some suggestions and thoughts on this for the next commission meeting, we will leave this as a separate agenda item just to make sure that there's separate space to discuss your recommendations, okay? So the Vice Chair and I will make sure this item comes back on the next agenda. So this is not going to have not had enough public vetting because it's been on the agenda, I think, for the last 4, and this will be the 5th meeting to make sure we get it right. It's a big deal and very important. So thank you for all your work on this. Okay, so we can wrap, I think, that item up. There is one public comment I see from the CalRecycle staff.
Yes, we have one comment from Peter Moy in the Fix-It Clinic. For all commissioners encountering computer issues and other technology problems, Fix-It Clinic has implemented 24/7 online repair via Discord, a gamers platform we have repurposed to provide repair. We stand ready to keep all the commissioners' tech in good working order so that you can continue unhindered with your important work.
Really, Peter? So you can actually fix all our little bandwidth problems and all of our glitches?
Yeah, Peter, can you come over later today?
Yeah, I was going to say, be careful on that offer. I think we'll all take you up on it.
Yeah, especially with all my kids and everyone online and everyone taking all the bandwidth and things crashing. Perfect. Yes.
No, honestly, I think we might all be emailing you today. So thank you for the offer. We appreciate it. Okay, so I'll make a note to myself. Contact Peter after this meeting. Very good. Thank you again, Peter, and thanks for everybody. Great discussion on this. So we'll bring it back at the next meeting again for more discussion. And now we can move on, since unfortunately Assembly Member Eggman let us know last week she couldn't make it. She really felt bad about it, wanted to come. I will try to get back in touch with them. She definitely wants to come back. So it might be at one of the next 2 meetings in December, maybe later. But I know she really wanted to address the commission per your request. We still do, just for the record, have on the agenda for December 2nd, I have confirmed David Alloway with the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality to kind of give us the overview that you had all requested regarding, their commission type work, the framework that they're operating in and how they did it. I know Ted and some others here are pretty familiar with it. I'm somewhat familiar with it, but it's really intriguing how they're looking at it much more, I think, holistically than the way we have been charged with looking at these issues. So we'll let, I guess the question I have is how much space, how much time do you want to give Commissioner David Alloway when we do that? But we'll talk about that on future agenda items on number 8. So anyway, we can move on from agenda item 5 and move on to item 6 for now, which is Commissioner Ward and I discussing the draft policy recommendations, where we are with the report. And again, I will just apologize that we did not have more time. Ted and I were both very busy in the last few weeks, and we are going to really commit to buckle down next week and get a lot of writing done and make sure this is as smooth and organized and flows as we possibly can. And he's also given me some ideas on vision statements. And before we talked about that today, I wanted to just kind of get a read, because we're getting so close to the end of our time together to get a report in January. Do you think it would be a good discussion to have, or is it too much to put on us at this point? Maybe for the July report, a discussion around the visions that we have for these recommendations in this report. Is that something you want to take space for before January 1, or would you like to wait on any sort of vision statements, concepts for this report for after January? Any thoughts on that, Commissioner? Is it Commissioner Sky?
I think because I'm just really grateful for the extension that we got, and I'm thinking that more and more the January report will really be focused on those consensus recommendations that we really want essentially to arm the legislature with as they start the next session, so that they can have some really good ideas that we think are the most urgent and ones that we somehow manage with a commission as diverse as this group is, to build consensus and to provide them with the feedback that we've gotten from so many stakeholders. So in short, I think that the bigger vision and the more overarching connection between the policies that we're pushing forward, as well as the ones that will be in the January report, should probably be in the July report.
That's what I was thinking too. So, so with that, I guess, unless anybody has anything else to say about the vision statements, we'll kind of put that on pause, Ted, and we'll just hold that in advance until we get through this report. Do you want to, I'll turn it over to you to give an update on where we are with the report.
Well, we're trying to incorporate the things that we have, and clearly, based on the discussion that we were just having, there's a little bit of confusion about clearly communicating when a policy comes out of a committee and it's ready to drop in. And so I have created, as recommended, the pending recommendations folder. So I asked each of the committee chairs, if you've had any recommendations that have gone through your process and you want to be uploaded to the document, whether or not they've been discussed by the full commission, just put that in the folder, communicate that to me, and we'll make sure that that's all uploaded. Because we, of course, do want the report to flesh out all of the policies and to read as well as possible. And right now, I believe what we're trying to do is drop everything in, and we're kind of recognizing that it doesn't read very well at this point in time. And we really want to improve that. But the most important thing is that we get the policies and the details in there, and then readability is something we'll try to make work after. I'm totally fine with the overarching visions thing going into the July report. I don't have any problem with that, but I do want to at least have space that as you're thinking of these individual policies, if there is some sort of overarching theme you want to strike, that there's space to do that somehow. That we don't want to leave any of your good ideas or impulses out of the discussion. They don't fit in the framework we put. That's pretty much it.
Okay, I would only just throw out there that maybe it would be helpful if when you do upload a policy to that folder that you actually say uploaded and put the date, because that would help us track when it actually became very public and transparent and when it started through the process. So if everybody could do that, that would be very helpful, unless somebody disagrees with that. But
another thing that would be helpful is if, as you read through the report, if you see anything that doesn't look right to you, especially if you're tied into it by committee or other personal action, please highlight it, let us know. Let's fix this.
Commissioner Davis, I think, has a question or a comment.
Yeah, actually, Commissioner Ward, I just went to that file, and I don't have permission because it's under the full committee. So,
so that is why I was setting up the individual folders in each of the committee folders. So there is one now in the recent. You have one in the market development. I'll make sure it's there as well.
Okay, I misunderstood. So I'm to. Let me go. So I go to market development committee. There's a policy. No, what am I looking for?
Okay, so in the market development committee, you've got market development policy proposals folder, and you drop those policy proposals into that folder, and then I'll know they're there, and I can incorporate them into.
And maybe, Ted, what we do is anything that's in that folder, if we can make an automatic process so we don't have to keep talking and we're not really supposed to do too much, is to just simply pull them into the commission meeting folder for the next commission meeting. So then that way it's copied, it's in both places, but yeah, maybe that could be your...
I'd be happy to do that, and I did just go through that. One of the things I did before this meeting is I looked through all of the recommendations folders in each of the committees to make sure that there wasn't anything in there that hadn't been uploaded. So I do check those periodically. But again, we'll just try to send emails and texts and communicate, and as soon as you drop something in, I'll try to upload it so everybody can see it.
The rule of thumb, please email everything. If you have questions regarding the folders or what's going into the report, please direct them to Ted. I'm trying to deal with the external stakeholders, and that would be very helpful, I think, if we differentiate that way, so we're not stepping on each other's toes. Great. Are there any other comments on the report, where we are now, the process, how we get recommendations into that report for January? It's very important we're all on the same page on this. Okay. Well then, I think... Yeah, go ahead.
And our hope is that the source reduction elements will be brought forth before the next meeting. There will be source reduction elements.
Thank you, Ted, and thanks to everyone for your help. I know it's a little awkward trying to do everything by Zoom, and we can't really talk because of all these rules. So I know it's frustrating, but I just want to thank all of you because we are doing really good work. We're going to have great policy recommendations, and we are getting there. So with that, I think we're done with this agenda item 6. Now, the next thing we had on the agenda was actually a 5-minute break. I would suggest that our next item is committee reports. Let's talk about the order in which we're going to go, because I know Commissioner Potashner with organics, he was going to have to go. And Commissioner Potashner, do you want to go first from organics? Would that be helpful to you?
You know, I think because I'm in the car, I think it'd be easier if Ted does it for us for this one. If you're okay with that, Ted?
I'd be happy to. Our next organics meeting is next week. So let's see. I'd have to look. I was not prepared to give the summary of.
Okay, well,
where-
we can take a break, or I just was more making sure we've got the order right so that if anybody has to leave, we make sure we got a full discussion around their committee. Is there any other committee chairs that have to leave that need to go first? No? Okay.
I
Because
think Richard is on the legislative panel that starts in 5 minutes. Is that right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah. He's not chairing any of the committees though, so he should.
Right.
We could put recycling at the end. I think he's on recycling committee, so we could put him later. Well, then why don't we go ahead and start with Commissioner Davis, if you're okay with at least doing market development, and then we'll take a 5-minute break if that's okay, and then we'll move to organics, recycling, and labeling again, and next meeting we can reverse them if that makes sense. But I think markets has the most proposals in writing for us to consider, so maybe we could turn it over to Commissioner Davis and chair the Market Development Committee.
Yeah, let me see. It'd probably be easier if I share the screen again, so I sent that request. And then we have narrative and we have a PowerPoint. The narrative is in the commission file for today. You've seen some of that narrative before, but we have made pretty substantial revisions after getting your initial comments and feedback. So let me see. Are you seeing a PowerPoint?
Yes, we are.
Commissioner Davis, could you make
Okay.
it full screen, please, so that the public webcast can see it easily? Oh, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, I just did. Okay, yeah. So actually, Commissioner Medrano and I are giving a presentation tomorrow at ZoneWorks, which is the semi-annual meeting of the Recycling Development Zone administrators and all the affiliated Cal Recycle staff. So we worked on our presentation yesterday after Monday's market development meeting. I think we've had 8 market development committee meetings. We started with a brainstorming session of identified over 5 dozen different items to address, and so we've been working to consolidate, expand, refine those recommendations, and work them into narrative. But what I'll show on the PowerPoint, I guess, is what Mr. Medrano and I developed for tomorrow's presentation to get feedback from the zone administrators and Cal Recycle staff working on market development. You know, you've seen this repeatedly. These are the 4 sections of the Public Resources Code that the Commission must address and that were delegated to the Market Development Committee to provide the framework for our report. As you know, we took action on the State Agency by Recycle campaign to include more products, include state contractors, repair information, content verification, enforcement. So that's already moved through the Commission. We brought to you a discussion of Cal EPA's consolidated permitting process, including local government in that process. There were, I think, questions about the process. We have been trying to track down any projects that have gone through the process. It's been on the books for 27 years, I believe, and we have yet to find a project, but nonetheless it is in the law. So we're now working on that 3rd bullet with the Governor's Office of Business Assistance and Economic Development, GoBiz, to better serve recycling and composting facilities. The Commission Chair Sanborn and I met with the GoBiz staff, and I think we're beginning to believe that maybe meshing GoBiz activity, because they're actively involved in permitting issues, meshing that with Cal EPA process that on the books is a viable recommendation. We provided a summary of that process to GoBiz, and so we hope to bring that forward at the next meeting. Again, the process is on the books. Local government's not included, and GoBiz didn't exist at the time, but we think there's a recommendation there. And as far as materials, we've had a lot of discussion around carpet. I had a presentation from the Carpet America group that administers California carpet recycling. And Carpet America Recovery Effort. And we had a presentation from their director on Monday. We have a set of recommendations. We've got CARES comments on that. We've asked for other recommendations, or other comments. We hope to finalize those, bring those to you at the next meeting. We're also starting to work on construction materials. Had a presentation on CalGreen, which is CalRecycle participates in it. It's a statewide construction material recycling effort that focuses on new construction, not on deconstruction. So that it's going to take us a while, I think, to maybe finalize a recommendation around construction materials. We're looking at some recycled content options, as well as inclusion of deconstruction and demolition activity. The recommendations that are in narrative in the Google Drive today have to do with CalRecycle specifically. And so, again, Mr. Medrano and I will be getting comments or hoping to get feedback tomorrow from at ZoneWorks. But the bulleted recommendation is to create a CalRecycle market development section, staff with business development, fiscal and economic analysis expertise to identify and recruit needed industries. Right now, market development is diffused across all the different activities in CalRecycle. There's permitting activities, there's research activities, there's technology activities, there's local government assistance and permit assistance. But because it's diffused, there's no one focus. And as you know, if everyone is in charge, no one's in charge. So we think that we're working on a recommendation to try to bring a focus to market development, or actually focus as it was at one time, a specific focus. I see Mr. Ward has raised his hand, so we got to call on him.
Thank you. Yes, Commissioner Davis, I just thought, and I like the idea of having a single CalRecycle market development section, but I really think the liaison with the university, both Cal State and CSU system, is really important there, because I just feel like there's a lack of training. And the folks who know about business development and understand the variabilities of dealing with recycled products, generally they're so well trained they could do anything and be more profitable than work in recycling market development. And so I really think there needs to be some mechanism by where we work with the universities and look at building up the training for the people to do these kinds of jobs, because usually, as you're well aware, people understand one aspect of it and the others are beyond their expertise. And there needs to be a mechanism by which we can have people actually do these kinds of jobs. And that requires programs in the university.
Yeah, good point. I think a lot of the CalRecycle staff are environmental scientists. We're suggesting here that it's more of probably more business people or people with a business background to bring that focus. But so the training and also technology. I think we've had at times, and maybe if I dive back into our long list of bulleted items, there is mention of the university and college system, and particularly around R&D. But we can certainly add training into that and expand the narrative here. So thank you. Once there's a focus, we think the next step would be to create a framework to identify gaps in statewide recycling, organics reuse and repair infrastructure, and then prepare strategies working with stakeholders to fill the gaps. CalRecycle's been really assiduous in involving stakeholders throughout the process. But again, bring that focus. We know we're exporting 8 million tons a year of paper fiber from California. Let's focus on that. We know the organics discussions have been going on for quite a while, but there's still an issue we don't really know the issues around repair and reuse. And in fact, at the Market Development Committee, we asked for a report on CalRecycle's recent repair grant process or RFQ that I understand generated about 5 or 6 times the proposals against the amount of available money. But what are people asking for in those industries? And we've had comments from Peter Mui, particularly on a regular basis about repair. But so we think those, once there's a framework, then begin to focus. And we know there's a need on, for example, on paper pulping to overcome reliance on bale exports, create local jobs and business opportunities, strengthen the infrastructure. So that's an example of a framework focus. Another one is to expand existing businesses in their use of recycled material. There are plastic molding companies, plastic product manufacturers in California using virgin materials while we're generating recycled feedstock that they could substitute for the virgin material. How do we go about identifying those businesses? How do we work with those who want to improve their sustainability and work with them to use the recycled feedstock? And then another example would be to work with existing small reuse and repair businesses, identifying their needs and responding to them, particularly helping them to expand. Some of that is local land use issues. We know on the repair side there's a lot of information, parts, tools that are lacking, and so how do we go about doing that in the existing framework? Reuse outlets, thrift stores are dealing with issues around fashion, textiles, clothing no longer has much of a secondary market, nothing close to what it used to be because so much of the clothing is fast fashion that falls apart. And then people are donating it to thrift stores. Thrift stores can't sell it. They can't sell it on the secondary market, and they're having to dispose of it and bear the cost of disposal. How do we address that? So those are examples of recommendations that could come forward once there's a viable framework. We think there needs to be a communication network. The Northeast Recycling Coalition, Southeast Recycling Coalition, multi-state coalitions are sharing market information. And we think that the sharing of that information with local governments, collectors, processors, brokers, businesses, manufacturers, let us all understand what we're dealing with. What are the contamination limits that affect pricing? What are the pricing opportunities for specific grades of material? Each person in that industry has their view of it, but it's not always shared as it is in some of the Eastern coalitions. So Mr. Valle has raised his hand on this one.
Mr. Valle?
Ted, John, Commissioner Davis, as you were speaking, yeah, I don't know if any of us have been monitoring the U.S. recycling system at the EPA on a national level, but one of their frameworks is they have 4 items: assessing recycling performance, reducing contamination, increasing processing efficiency, strengthening recycled material markets. And this, as you know, it was convened in November of 2018. Has anybody been monitoring what they're doing on a national level to see if there's any synergy between what we're doing and what they're doing?
I've been watching it, but
my response, I looked at it. Yeah, I think others are looking at it, but frankly, there hasn't been a lot of relevance in my world. But was that the chair who was commenting?
Yeah, well, I was just saying I'm on the SWANA Advisory Committee, and we are monitoring all of that. There's going to be a lot coming out of EPA that's new now, so I think we just continue to monitor it and see, but our preliminary recommendations are going to go before anything's changed at the national level. So again, we're just operating. We can't know every single thing that's going on, and we're doing our best with the information we have and the parameters we've been given, but I wouldn't say we shouldn't proceed with trying to throw out some ideas and see if we have time to check harmonization. We could suggest that we check, that someone check with what's happening at the national level. But our bandwidth, I think, is pretty much consumed, and we don't have time to continue. I keep getting emails from commissioners that they're worried we keep taking on more and more at every meeting, and we have to be careful not to overload our plates any further. So I guess I'll just keep watching all that stuff, and others can too. And if we see that there's something that is not aligning, we should speak up. That's helpful.
Yeah. So the last set of our thinking has to do with a sustainable funding source, and I'm going to switch to the narrative once I finish this real quickly, because we had a really good, concise discussion on Monday about opportunities to create sustainable funding around market development or CalRecycle. It ranged from the kind of perennial discussion about increasing that 25-year-old landfill surcharge to generator fees, to the statewide initiative that's coming up in a couple of years to EPR. So I'm not sure we have a single recommendation, although there's some obvious ones, but it's kind of like recommending wine and liquor bottles on the CRV program. That's an obvious recommendation. So is increasing that landfill fee that has lost 82.5% of its value since 1995. But those battles have been fought, and we need to look at a broader analysis. I hate to kick the can by suggesting a study, and we haven't really formed that yet, but there are probably a variety of solutions that might fit in different frameworks. Clearly, CalRecycle needs a sustainable funding source. Relying on the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund is every year is a slippery slope. This year it yielded 0, I think. So, Mr. Ward.
Well, just talking about funding mechanisms, just brainstorming, I'm recognizing all the materials that are currently used for packaging that are not going to be on the recycling list. How about we put a fee for all packaging determined to be non-recyclable that's used in California, and then use those fees for market development purposes?
That's very big.
I know it's a big ask, but it's like, where's the money going to come from, and where should it come from? It should come from the entities that are not engaged in trying to solve these problems. If they're not engaged, there should be a price to pay. That's the basic message.
Anybody else want to speak to that? Looks like Manuel.
Yeah, I see that more appropriate coming out of the recycling committee as one of their recommendations. It's as far as infrastructure, yeah, of course, it would be great to get that funding for that, but I see it more appropriate from that, and I don't know what the recycling committee thinks.
I'm going to just say, I think this has got something to do with the proposition that's on the ballot in 2022, and Commissioner Lapis had his hand up.
Yeah, that's all I was going to say, is that is a big part of the ballot measure proposal. It's a fee on plastics manufacturers of up to a penny per component of packaging based on how recyclable it is. And the money is used for market development, and it's market development across material types.
So,
I think,
what I heard at the end of go ahead.
Before, John, I was just going to say that what I've heard from the rumblings that the legislators on the trip I was on, et cetera, is nobody wants to get anywhere near being in the way of that proposition. So if there's anything that looks like it's going to get tangled up and hurting that proposition, I'm not sure there's an appetite for that. So I'd probably stay out of recommendations in that area. Just the thought.
Yeah, I think what we may end up finally, and if I can get through the PowerPoint and jump briefly to the narrative, I'll show you how it's shaping up. But I think we're kind of identifying different mechanisms. You always run into that 2/3 legislative issue, and no matter how you characterize it, it's still affects someone. So, yeah, but the initiative is a big opportunity. Great. And, we do have some very specific recommendations that we'll be discussing tomorrow again on the RMDD loan program to accelerate the approval process upon receipt of complete loan applications within 30 days. Refer potential projects immediately to loan staff for eligibility determination. Right now it goes through a different process, which is a bit of a bottleneck. Create an online loan application form, be processed by loan staff. There are plenty of online forms, and I'm not sure if there aren't some online applications already on CowerCycle staff. Reducing the loan interest rate. The interest rate is 4% fixed. The fixed portion of it is of interest to some borrowers. The 4% is not. Most commercial lending is on a floating rate, and but those rates are so low right now that the 4% is not really attractive. The loan program used to use the state municipal investment fund rate, which is around 1.25%, that there, when that was offered, the program was averaging about $10 million a year in loans. It's now averaging about $4 million. So I think the program could be enhanced by reducing the interest rate. And then the big issue, looking at a comprehensive loan fund review to secure perpetuity to keep the program going. Right, CowerCycle actually put money into the program from the Integrated Waste Management Fund for, I want to say, the first almost 10 years of the program, maybe 8 years. And it stopped doing that. So the program is self-sustaining. The money back in from loan repayments keep the fund active, but the fund is pretty small. It's $5-6 million in repayments. So if we're going to expand the program, there needs to be some kind of review over that. Just reloaning the same money all the time is self-limiting. One of the specific recommendations that came up in discussions was basically using the state iBank, the investment bank, to issue bonds secured by the loan repayments to increase the amount of loan funds available. When there was excessive demand on the loan fund in the past, CowerCycle sold the loans on the secondary market, which is what most lenders do. Your bank doesn't hold your mortgage; they sell it to investment group and regain the money and then reloan that money. Every time you do that, there's a discount involved. The iBank discount is there, but it's probably not as extensive, and it's a much more direct process between two state agencies. So basically, you'd be taking the outstanding loan portfolio, issuing bonds secured by the repayment on that portfolio, using the bond fund to reloan and keep turning. But it does, over time, reduce the amount of capital that's available if all you have is that initial loan portfolio to secure. So it's not really a sustainable option, but it's a way to keep generating money if there were a way to, once again, introduce money back into the fund.
I just want to do a time check.
Increasing the loan amount.
So
Okay.
is this the last slide? And you're asking for input on all these because if we get input, then we got to put final words in policy, right? Just to make sure I'm clear.
Yeah. If commissioners have input now or before the next meeting, if you have some now, we've already taken some. So real quickly to finish them up, increasing the loan amount to focus on highest priority materials, part of that framework discussion. Offering a micro loan program that's been talked about quite a bit, but if we're going to begin to focus on local reuse and repair businesses, that's important. And then do a restructure with zone administrators and CowerCycle staff working together based on input from the previous borrowers. So that's it.
Any commissioners' comments or thoughts on the outline of these draft policy proposals? Because it looks like really it's our chance to give him. Sorry, go ahead, John.
Yeah, so I would say just real quickly, there is on the Google Drive, there's the full narrative that I just summarized with PowerPoint. And at the end of that narrative, there's a discussion of the initiative, EPR, generator surcharge, and landfill surcharge. So.
This is a lot, and it's a lot of information that I think a lot of you did not see a whole lot of time in advance of this meeting. So I just want to make sure, everybody, this is our just first bite at the apple. But John, are you going to take the comments you get today, put this in actual policy language, and then bring it back to the next meeting as first reading final?
Yeah. I think I'll bring it back to the committee. We'll put it in that policy framework. I'll ask for the committee's support in bringing it forward as a recommendation. That's the way we've been working to have consensus from the committee. And yeah, we would bring it back. But any comments you have today will facilitate our finalizing it before the next meeting. And it looks like there are some things.
And any comments? I only see Ted. Did Ted? He already spoke, I think. And then there's Commissioner Cal. Let's see. Commissioner Ward, are you next?
Yeah, sorry.
What I thought was Valle, Ward, and
yeah.
Cal.
Yep. Bye.
Yeah, thank you. John, on the IBEC loans, the amount 5,000. Did you? How did you come up with those numbers?
On the micro loan?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a bit of a. I think we were trying to think along the lines of what a small business might use. It's been discussed amongst the RMDZ administrators and CalRecycle staff for a number of years. It could be 100,000, but there's a threshold, and we'll try to clarify that tomorrow. There's kind of a threshold where the borrowing, if you want to borrow $25,000 with the fees and the interest rate, it kind of doesn't pencil out, right? So I think that's where the number comes from.
Okay. Well, I'd like to continue that discussion. We've had discussions around iBank at the county level for business, but in our industry, those amounts are not very high, given the cost of equipment and the cost of operations. So that's why I'm asking. But I do want to continue that discussion, if I could, with you, because my experience with the iBank, we've done a lot of business with them at the county level, and I think that has potential, but I'm just concerned about how do you secure those loans, what are the guarantees.
Right.
So I want to continue that element with you, but I think it's a good idea.
Yeah, I'd like to reach out on that, and just maybe I may have confused iBank and the microloan. The microloan would be kind of part of the RMDZ loan program, and not an iBank issue.
Okay. All right. Well,
so
I'd like to.
I'd like to hear more about that.
Yeah. I want to continue that discussion when we bring it back. Okay. Thank you.
And real quickly on larger amounts, I've entered into some discussions around bond issues that are green bonds or climate bonds, and how that applies to the industry for larger projects. So, but really not ready to bring that forward yet.
Okay, so then the last time we'll have a discussion will be at the next commission meeting. And if the language has to be finalized by the next commission meeting to get into the report January 1st, just FYI. Okay, so we've got, who's next?
Real quickly, I just thought I would point out that I think the recycling market development planning and regional planning have a lot of overlap, and particularly with respect to infrastructure development in the rural areas, regional planning is really important, and because you can't afford to do everything, so you need to strategically figure out how you can work with your neighbors. And I'm just recognizing the overlap of the need for regional planning and the need for regional planning under recycling market development. Encourage you to address them at the same time.
Yeah, the RMDZ program has nothing to do with changing land use, but I think I know there were comments early on about some of our recommendations around Office of Planning and Research and integrating that with local integrated waste management planning. But I can look and see if we can find a link here on market development.
Commissioner Kaplikoff next.
Okay.
Yeah, this is just a quick question. Cal Recycle has been pretty successful with the organics grants, competitive ones for the last 5 years. Was there any discussion on the market development committee to look at a competitive grant for plastic and paper fiber recycling mills as part of funding? I know funding is the challenge, but was there discussion on that?
We talked about the GGRF fund, the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, and there is money under the loan program and under the grant program from those funds. But again, those are the greenhouse gas reduction funds. I think what we've approached here is to try to come up with a framework to identify, what those needs are, but also address that funding issue. Yeah, if we had $100 million a year to use, we could do a lot more than relying on the GGRF money. I think the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund grants for fiber and plastic have been less than $10 million a year, the 2 or 3 years they've had them. So more money has gone into organics, but it's still not close to what's needed. We've also had, just for input, we've had discussion about doing zero interest loans in lieu of grants. Since the grant money goes out and doesn't come back, and maybe zero interest loans would be an attractive option, and even some loan forgiveness depending on performance. So, those are far more complicated than I think we want to take forward because it's all speculative now. But the ballot initiative is a big deal, and I don't recall what percentage of that money ends up under Cal Recycle's use for market development, but it's a potentially very substantial amount. I think the Office of the Legislative Analysts estimated billions of dollars a year at current generation, with a 1 cent per item of single-use foodware or single-use packaging. That means there are literally hundreds of billions of single-use plastic items going out there. So there's a lot of money riding on that initiative that could do what I think you're talking about, Mr. Kaplikoff.
Thank you.
Commissioner Ward is next.
Pass.
Okay. We're about at 10:30. So how do you feel, John? Have you had enough feedback? Is there anything else you want us to highlight to get feedback before you feel comfortable putting this in?
Yeah, the narrative is up there. I tried to hit the highlights with the PowerPoint. I got some good comments to incorporate. We'll get some more comments tomorrow, but please, if you do have specific comments, feel free to send them along once you've had a chance to read the document. But, and I know this is, Mr. Medrano and I are zone administrators. We're pretty close to these issues. It's not something that's on everybody's radar like the broader recycling issues that we deal with. But we'll bring something back in 2 weeks.
Yeah, I think I was in the queue as well. Just quick question, John. Did you guys talk at all about coordinating with other states on market development, specifically thinking the Pacific Northwest and paper?
Yeah, we we have not had that discussion, but I did mention the Northeast Coalition effort. Yeah, but we have not talked about it, but there's definitely some potential there.
Maybe for the July report, if we could get into what the state can do in coordination with, Washington and Oregon on paper markets, that seems like a really big opportunity.
You could also just, Ted and I could take a stab at the language on in the bigger umbrella context that we have the Pacific Coast Collaborative, where we work with Oregon and Washington and British Columbia on things that affect the ocean and climate, and maybe that we encourage more collaboration between all of us on markets, whether it's for plastic or paper. I know certainly in the energy space we do that. We rely on Oregon water hydro at times of the year we need it. So maybe that's just a general conversation that we just highlight. I know I've spoken to Governor's Office representative several times about the need to do that after our trips up there, because it really does make a lot of sense. Some of these facilities are huge and expensive, and we can't have one in every state for various reasons. So Ted, maybe you and I could take a stab at even just a sentence or two and just see what everybody thinks on that. Okay, well, lots of great work from Market Development Committee. Thank you so much. So we'll look forward to final language at the next meeting. And how about we all give ourselves a 5-minute break and come back here for the last committee reports in 5 minutes. Right, see you soon. We just got through the Market Development Committee, and the next committee we were going to discuss was organics, and I know Commissioner Potashner, the chair, cannot be on, so I think he had turned that over to you, Commissioner Ward.
I'd be happy to do that. Let me just deal with that. Okay. So at the last organics meeting, we had a couple presentations from the California Farm Bureau and another one from New Light. California Farm Bureau was highlighting that they're, of course, already handling an enormous amount of agricultural residue as part of their regular activities, and they also were highlighting some of their rendering activities and how those overlap with some of our organics management goals. So they seem to be asking sort of kind of for their own relationship, and that was a little bit of a challenging act, but we're kind of working through it because there's, of course, lots of overlap and tremendous opportunity there. The other presentation was from New Light, which is a California manufacturer of a non-petroleum-based, non-PLA plastic. And so they, again, are making a variety of claims regarding its compostability. And we did talk about some of the issues surrounding that, and specifically asked how they felt about the confusion associated with what is a compostable plastic and what isn't, and how we might be able to untangle those issues. They said they were going to get back to us on that issue. Other issues we're dealing with are trying to align the definition of what's compostable with 1335, specifically what is practically compostable in California facilities. And then we started the conversation about infrastructure, but it appears that we're in kind of a holding pattern on that. So we really, of course, that's a huge issue in terms of we're all aware of the disconnect between the organics recovery goals and the available infrastructure and the projected dates of availability of that infrastructure, but we don't really have words on paper yet. I understand this was also an issue that was going to be dealt with by the Recycling Market Development Committee, and what I just heard from Chair Potashner is that we're both waiting for each other to start. So hopefully we've now gotten past that point. We recognize that one of us really needs to start on the infrastructure. I'm hoping that it'll be the organics group, but that's kind of the summary report. And all I know Chair Potashner is on the line, and if I've missed anything or need a different emphasis, I invite him to. Okay, maybe I was wrong about him being on the line. That's the status report. Currently, we don't have any additional language to drop in. You already saw the precautionary proposal and the food rescue proposal. Those are incorporated in the documents, and they're available for your review. I think they're pretty much ready to go, at least on those two aspects, but we are looking for further work on the infrastructure.
So are you asking, because I think I just helped upload that food rescue update. So that's like the first reading today. Is that something we want to go through in detail to make sure everybody understands and then get approval to put it in the document for the first reading?
I actually think it's the second reading. I thought we brought that forward before.
Oh, that's right. We did do it. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is essentially, unless there's any objections, then I think this is the second reading, and we'll move it to black. Sounds like Mr. Davis has something.
Yep. Mr. Davis.
Yeah, actually, two things on the market development issue and organics facilities. I think we've taken a broader approach rather than focus on issues specific to organics projects like the Clean Air Act impacts on air district permitting. So we're not diving into those. You guys are free to play around with those. On the food issue, I think last time Mr. Lapis and I were to meet and discuss language on one of the recommendations, which we did. So I believe the document that's in the meeting file has suggested additional paragraph on financial support for food recovery organizations. And that was an item that was the one segment that was left in abeyance from the last meeting. So there is a suggested language there, which I can show if you'd like.
But yeah, I think we should show everybody and make sure we can see it.
That would be great.
Okay. Yeah, let me
Mastered this, that. John, so we're relying on you.
I sent a request. Hang on.
Oh, there you are.
Everybody's heads just got really big.
I'm not going to show the correct document, but I'll get that. Okay. You see this one, food recovery policy proposal? Okay. So I think it was the proposal on sustainable food recovery organizations. There's still this error here on number 8 that we identified last time. But it's still, that hadn't been fixed, at least when the document that I could find still has this strange language that's got Commissioner Sky knows what it should read, but it hasn't been changed. So the section that Mr. Lapis and I focused on, the current language says to incentivize local jurisdictions, include funding for food recovery, so that's number 9. And then the recommended paragraph that I added is to provide guidance on direct generator financial support for food recovery organizations. Donations produce tax credits to the generators, but only when there is sufficient infrastructure to collect and distribute the food. Food recovery organizations should be able to receive money directly from generators to support that infrastructure and create the tax benefits. So this is something that I've been looking at with our regional food recovery organizations, and we'd like to understand more about the benefits that the generators receive, and so that first paragraph is really to help us with that. We know they can take a tax credit for the value of the food, but how is that value calculated, and how can we translate that into dollars that might be used to help support the recovery organizations? Interestingly, if right now the tax credit, 100% of it goes to the generator. If the generator then made a financial donation to these food recovery organizations, they'd still capture 100% of the value, because that financial donation becomes a tax-exempt donation. And so they'd still keep 100% of the value, but the food recovery organizations would benefit. So it's an idea that think really needs to be aired out, and so I'm suggesting that it be included in your language.
Okay, Commissioner Sky, it looks like you've got a comment.
Just in terms of the language for section 4.8, Commissioner Ward, would it be helpful if I just emailed you the correct language so that you can correct it in the right spot? Great, thanks.
Thoughts on the section 10 that's been added? Sounds like you've already vetted this with some groups that could benefit from this, so it seems like a worthy item to have in there for thought. Okay. Well, I see I have one other commenter from Commissioner Medrano.
Just not on that section, but on section 3, invest in food recovery infrastructure. Then item number 6, CalRecycle should expand RMDZ. It's RMDZ low interest loan program. That is actually already available for folks that, for organizations that would like to borrow that funding, unless I'm understanding that incorrectly. But if they need it for refrigerated trucks or storage units, it's already available.
You're right. We should have taken that out. That was flagged earlier too. If somebody can, whoever has the screen up in front of them, if they can get rid of 6. Thanks, Manuel.
Did you have a chance to read it thoroughly? I mean, because I guess if we approve it today, we still get another bite at the apple, and ultimately, until we do the final approval of the report, the last meeting of December, it's all can be changed at the last. But if we change it past next meeting, it wouldn't make it into the January report because it needs 2 readings. So it is getting time for all of us to set time aside and really make sure we go through all this stuff very carefully before the next meeting, word for word. Okay, and what other recommendations are coming out of the organic section for the next meeting, Ted, that we might get into the January 1 report?
Well, I'm really hoping that we'll have an infrastructure item, that we have assigned that, and I know they're working on it, and that's the thing that I think is most likely to come. And then the aligning the compostable with the 1335 and our discussions about California compostable versus a compostable standard. I believe both those things will likely come forward. The infrastructure one, because we haven't seen that yet, I'm a little more hesitant to confirm that'll make the January report, but that's our ambition.
It's to actually get the definition of compostable in there.
Yeah.
Okay, because that's a very big deal, obviously. So
it is, and I can say that in general, the discussion, and I'm just characterizing because we haven't had the final vote, is moving towards a California compostable definition kind of thing. That if it says California compostable, we can all count on that, and we'll get through our systems. But the existing definitions of compostable, generally, we got a lot of stuff we got to clean out, and that's not compostable.
So is that coming up at the next organics committee meeting? We should give our followers a heads up that that's a very big discussion coming up. Weigh in on.
I believe it is. Mr. Pashner, are you on? No. So I believe it is, but I will confirm. I believe our next meeting is next Monday.
Okay. So for anybody listening who cares about the definition of compostable, highly recommend you watch the next organics committee meeting and weigh in, and then the following commission meetings when it's brought to us, so we can all hear the thoughts of all the stakeholders, because that's a very big decision. Yeah. Great. Okay. Well, thank you for your update from the organics committee, and
And
So
I guess
far,
I'll one last thing, because it was in the comments that were real focused from the LA County, and I sure appreciate the comments from the LA County task force, but there are specific focus comments about the SB 1383 timelines and requests for modifying those flexibility. I anticipate that there will be some discussion at the Organic Committee level to decide whether or not we want to incorporate any of those sorts of recommendations in the January report towards July. But my guess is
I think we've
we'll
heard from
want to
Oceanside
have
on that.
this discussion. Yeah.
Oceanside and others, I think, have given that comment as well.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Well, 2 great committee reports. We're making progress and getting those things in the report. So I think the next committee, we've always done recycling before labeling and public education. So we'll turn it over to Chair Donlevy, and he did post a few slides that he had given us this morning to kind of outline where they are. Chair Donlevy?
Excellent, thank you. So the recycling committee, if you could bring up the slides. We don't have anything that we're going to be proposing for approval today, but we will be ready for the December 4th and 16th meeting at the commission level. Does somebody have those slides that can be brought up?
Asking Cal Recycle, do you guys have them? It's really hard for me to do it. I'm afraid I'm going to knock myself off the whole.
We did not receive anything, but if you have them, feel free to screen share.
They're on the, oh boy, okay, I'll try, because if I escape out of the full screen, I really worry I'm going to knock myself out of this.
Oh, if you can bring it up, that would be great. I can't share from my laptop, but the items that we'll have, and we'll probably need 45 minutes plus at the next meeting dedicated to going through our items, but finalizing the what is recyclable list. We have a few items on plastic as far as non-compatible shrink sleeves, non-compatible components, clear PET only in the CRV program. And I think a few of those will be language changes in the bottle bill that I think will be pretty simple to incorporate. We'll also have some language addressing the dealer take back with the grocery stores, being able to receive the CRV money back from the containers that they take back from the consumers, and getting grocers paid a portion of the handling fees. And then some support. There we go. Next slide.
I'm actually doing it, Heidi. I was already on the screen share, so I just pulled it up.
Perfect. You have full screen.
Although I'm not seeing, you know what? It's not in full screen. Anybody know how to full screen on Google Drive? Or do I need to download?
I think it's under view.
Download it.
Full screen at the bottom.
Ah, that full screen. Yeah, that's as big as it gets.
That'll work if we go to the next slide. John, thanks for bringing this up. Next slide would be great.
Yeah.
So I've gotten to item 5, supporting the dealer take back, letting the grocers get paid. And then convenience zones and the CalRecycle AB 54 report, supporting language that would allow the adjustment of the existing convenience zones that are currently at a ½ mile or 3 miles in rural areas, allowing CalRecycle or the director to adjust them based on certain areas, give them a little more latitude in defining the zones and the requirements of the grocers and the dealers within those zones. what they would have to do. What I don't see in there, part of the convenience zone that we had talked about, is currently the language allows for a 35% exemption of stores. That's statewide. I think we're going to be recommending 35% exemption in a jurisdiction, so we don't run into a situation like the people up in Humboldt County and Eureka are running into, where the recycling centers have all closed, but I think they have 14 or 16 grocery stores that would trigger the convenience zone, but they've all applied for exemptions. So you don't have anybody up there that's required to take containers back, even in the absence of no recycling centers. So part of the convenience zones, adjusting the exemptions from 35% statewide to 35% by jurisdiction, whether it be a city or county, but allowing CalRecycle some latitude to determine how many stores can actually be exempt in a certain area, because it's not right for all the residents up in Humboldt that all the stores within their right applied for exemptions, and now they have nowhere to take their containers back. And unfortunately, there's only one dealer up in that area that is outside of a zone that is required to take containers back. And I would feel bad if everybody up there realized that and took their containers to that one dealer. Most likely that dealer would probably just pay the $100 a day fee and stop taking them. But Humboldt has a much bigger issue. So, so if we go on to the next slide.
To clarify, these were all things that were brought to us. In concept, we've discussed them, we kind of know, but we're just at this point waiting for the language, and then we can, so if there's any further direction from the commissioners on to the committee on what you'd like to see in these specific proposals, I think now's the time before they write them up.
Correct. Time to get pen to paper, and that's something that either I could work with you or Commissioner Valle, just the exact format that we want to see, how we bring in some of the draft language from the legislation, what could be changed. So we're ready for December 4th and hopefully wrap everything up on December 16th.
Gur, is that something as vice chair of that committee you could help with? Because I think we did give an outline for each committee on how to format it. But I think every committee at this point, it does get hard, especially for the chair. There's a whole lot of stuff to write up. If the committee members could help put pen to paper on these different pieces so we could get them in front of the commission for approval, that would be awesome. I don't hear anybody jumping. I mean, this is actually the part that gets time consuming, and I know that. But if we want this stuff in the report for January, it has to be written up between now and the next meeting.
Yeah, I think we'll be able to get there.
Okay.
If we go on to slide 3.
Sorry, I just went to the wrong place.
Similar, but not the same.
Yeah, I know. I don't know what happened to it. I put myself in the box. Well, that's interesting. I went to give comment and then I lost the screen and somehow I must have closed the file. So hold on.
Okay. Well,
I do have, and as you know, I've got some. Sorry.
It's okay. Just go back to the Google Doc.
John, while you're looking for it, I'll kind of walk everybody through. On the December 4th agenda for the Recycling Committee, we are going to be addressing the pathway to getting on the what is recyclable list. And Chair Sanborn, you mentioned a stewardship plan. I think that's definitely something to explore. You mentioned pilot programs, and I'm one to shy away from pilot programs because I think we need long-term solutions. And I think pilot programs just delay the long-term solution. In the case of the thermoforms or the cartons, I think those groups have done a good job initially to help some facilities with optical sorters or equipment, so they could go out and say that, yes, our item's being recycled. But we need to look at how facilities up in Crescent City, up in Humboldt, all the way down into the desert and the high desert, all the smaller facilities have access to that same equipment before we say something's recyclable. So it has to, the industries have to provide the same resources to all the facilities. We have 76 facilities. About half of them have optical sorters that are kicking out a lot of PET material, and the quality difference between their material and those that are just doing a positive sort is greatly different. And the contamination level is much different, and they affect everybody else. So with the pathway, definitely having the stakeholders take responsibility on providing funding so their items can be recovered and ultimately get onto the list of what is recyclable. So we'll be addressing that. We heard from Amazon and Sealed Air, two stakeholders in the e-commerce sector, and they both had a lot of very good information on what they were doing to reduce the amount of waste and material that they were putting out there. And the number that kind of hit me was Amazon, every year they're producing and sending out about 350,000 tons of material a year that's going out into our communities, and that's, I think, nationwide. So if California is, 12% of that, they're still putting a lot of material out into California, and the burden of recycling that goes on to the collection programs, the haulers, things like that. Both of the presenters were a little lacking on details as far as how much of the material is actually getting recycled, and it seemed like they wanted to engage with the collection and processing infrastructure and put a lot of the emphasis and the responsibility on those that are doing it now to keep doing it instead of actually engaging on their own. And the question I was asking them is what they could do to take responsibility for their material. And the fallback was work with the current collection and processing infrastructure. So they want to keep pushing it back down to the current haulers and MRFs. So other items that are kind of on hold as far as adding wine and spirits or increasing the deposit, we've asked CalRecycle for some data, some financial data on that, because those are two very big requests financially. The amount of money that would be contributed and what the impact could be on recycling centers or curbside programs, and then the increased deposit. That's the biggest one. And with the CRV program, the CRV is actually taxed. So if you're putting down $1 for CRV as a deposit, you're also paying your local sales tax on that. So the CRV program at $1.3 to $1.4 billion a year is also generating about $100 million a year in general fund sales tax revenue. So if we were to make a recommendation to increase the deposit and put the program up over $2 billion, we would also be putting a pretty heavy sales tax burden onto the consumers. And before we make that recommendation, we really want to know where the money is going to go and if it's truly going to help promote more redemption opportunities in our communities to get that material back. Then the other two items that are on hold right now is a discussion about using any additional funds in the program to promote redemption opportunities in underserved areas. No action taken, and that's on hold right now. And then the same thing on a density-based processing payment. I'm going to try and work on something that I could bring possibly to the December 4th meeting that we could look at that. So that's where we're at. So we'll be back here on the December 2nd commission meeting with more information, but we do have 2 meetings scheduled, December 4th and December 18th.
Right. John, could you go back to the slide 3, please? Real quickly. And then I've got some commissioners that want to speak. I think the next person is Commissioner Warden, and I'll mention something. Go ahead.
So the question relates to the pilot projects, and essentially our observation both in Humboldt and here is that sometimes the specificity of all of the requirements under AB 2020 becomes a stifling to actual innovation in terms of program development and access to convenient recycling centers. And I'm wondering if, I'm sure the recycling committee has talked about that. Is there any way out of this morass?
I think John Davis touched on it a little bit. I don't know how we incorporate it, but just like the market development group, CalRecycle needs to have a little more of a business mindset than a bureaucratic process mindset, and have the ability to work with stakeholders to develop programs in areas that need them. And I've said it before, CalRecycle staff, very good, very knowledgeable, but they call balls and strikes. They don't call any of the plays. And I think they need to have the ability to work with areas and develop programs that meet those specific areas. So I was on a call with the Humboldt Waste Management Authority, and it's city council and county supervisors. They're all very concerned that they don't have any redemption opportunities up there. And I was telling them that they're at least 2 years away from anything that this commission is doing or any legislation from anything having an impact. Because if legislation is signed in September of 2021, it'll take CalRecycle about 18 months to develop the regulations to support it. So any meaningful changes to the CRV program are 2 to 3 years away. And in an area like Eureka that doesn't have a recycling center now, that's not good, because those people would definitely like to recycle if they had an opportunity. So.
Oh, you're killing us. Literally.
Well, this is literally why some of us support a private sector EPR approach with the proper controls, because the state legislation and the regulations process is so long, it cannot respond to markets very quickly.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's one of the huge benefits of a stewardship organization. But to start one new and take on the current bottle bill and everything that we're doing, it might take 3 to 5 years to really get it going. And in California, with 40 million people, we would be 10 times the size of the Oregon program or 5 times the size of the Michigan program. It would be very challenging to have one stewardship organization take over all of California, because the needs in Northern California and Southern California are greatly different.
Well, it's all really how you design it, because they could have the flexibility. That's the joy of those kinds of programs. They could be flexible. It's how we design them to be, allow them to adjust for North and South and all of that. And we heard the same, just as background, we heard the same comments from the paint industry. You're too big, you're California. I think it's one of the best run stewardship programs there are, is the paint program. And it's working pretty darn well. So it is possible, but it doesn't happen overnight, that's for sure. Anything when you're talking 40 million people with the diversity of California, it doesn't happen overnight. I mean, I think many of us, Ted's nodding, we went through many years of calls with Paint Care and trying to figure out the details and the contracts and everything else. But we got through it. Now I think that there's 11 states with that program. So anyway, Commissioner Lapis, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I mean, without opening a can of worms and having a huge debate, I just want to put a flag that I disagree with the notion that a industry-run program would not have the same issues. It all depends on what you tell them to do or not do, and I don't think it's an inherent flaw of having a state-run program. You know, we heard from Oregon about some of the great stuff that they're doing, but one of the key takeaways from their presentation was that really their recycling rate surpassed California's when they doubled their deposit. And prior to that, it hadn't. It lagged behind California. And so, you know, it's complicated, and the issues that Jeff identified are important. I'm just not sure I'd be comfortable ever saying that the solution would be switching to a manufacturer-owned program, because I don't think those are the problems we're facing.
Well, maybe I misunderstood. I thought the problem we were facing was the time it takes to pass regulation, and that does take 2 years. So when it's a regulated entity and we have to get a regulation change, it doesn't move fast enough to keep up with markets.
That's true. That's a very fair point. But we've also seen that with private manufacturer-owned systems as well, where they've not kept up with market realities. And but you're right. I mean, the level of I would argue that the level of prescriptiveness in the program is a hindrance to being adaptable. But that's not necessarily a flaw of the program as it is. I mean, of having a state-run program.
To confirm, I mean, true EPR programs, you set the performance standard, the industry figures out how to get there, and the state holds them accountable and transparent and enforces against it. If any one of those things falls apart, you have a problem. So if the performance standard isn't correct, if the enforcement and the accountability is not being held up, all those things can lead to the program failing. But if that was the design, was that if you set the performance standard, they figure out how to get there and they can move very quickly, much faster than regs or law could change. But this is the discussion, right? So this is, it's good that we're having
it. It's not a new conversation. It's not one we're going to solve.
Correct.
On this call.
Yeah. Is there anybody else that wanted to speak on this? Okay. One thought I had.
Yeah, Heidi. I'm sorry, Heidi. It's not on the. I wanted to speak earlier on one of the prior discussions, but if you're looking for input on the CRV specifically, I can wait.
Go ahead.
Okay. It's on the number one, what is recyclable, and Commissioner Donlevy, you know, it's that I do have concerns about the framework, and when I looked at Cal Recycle's, the way they've been dealing with the state agency, what is recyclable issue, it diverges from what I've seen coming from the recycling committee. So I just wanted to let you know I would appreciate, you know, a discussion of why 75% instead of 65 ramping up, which is what they did. Why that detailed look into market conditions, pricing, when I think implicit in Cal Recycle's work is the idea if bales are being created and sold, there's a market, and that's sufficient for passing, rather than try to do a deep dive on a number of variables that I haven't yet been able to grasp. or C. And then I did, and I think other people may have had the same issue trying to utilize the Excel file. You know, you and I spent several hours trying to get a copy of that file that I could actually open up and look at. And I'm not sure if I sent you the revisions that that I found just from the Vertex facilities there. But so when we look at that, I'm not sure if we're going to get that Excel file again in a way that we can open and use. But I did have concern about the divergence from what the committee's doing, what CalRecycle took the approach on the state agencies, and how that impacts the recommendations. And, you know, the obvious one is polypropylene. I think if you add the Vertex facilities, it's 75%. They're recovering materials being marketed and sold, and yet I'm not sure it's on that 15-item list. So, so just to give you my concern about what might be coming on that issue.
Okay. With the Excel file, we will do everything we can to get that posted up onto the Google Docs today. And if anybody's having trouble opening it, please contact me, or we'll find out a way to get that open. Then, yeah, if there are specific items that we think should be on the list, let's have that discussion. I know polypropylene, okay, that's one resin type, but there's many different types of polypropylene, whether it's bottles or rigids. I think there's some facilities, possibly Vertex, that were the beneficiaries of some optical sorting equipment that might have been provided by the producers, and they're under contract for a purchase agreement for that material. So that would be an example of an industry that is providing equipment to some to say that all of their material is recyclable. And I think that's what we would look for statewide, that if they're going to provide equipment to one, they should provide it to all. If they're going to provide a guaranteed price for one, they should provide that price for all. Instead of just going to the most populous areas, saying, here's an optical sorter for PP, or here's an optical sorter for cartons, and then using, you know, those key markets and a few operations to say that their material is recyclable statewide. You know, and maybe they went to facilities that were looking for funding or had the space to expand to sort additional material. So the pathway to get on the what is recyclable list is that opportunity has to be provided to all processors in the state, and not just a few.
I guess the assumption is that the polypropylene that is being recovered is done through these optical sorters provided by the industry. And I know the industry started offering grants in the last few months to do that, but if 75% of the MRFs in California are recovering polypropylene, which I believe they are from that Excel file, then that predated these opticals. I know on the Vertex facilities I'm familiar with, they're not optically sorting polypropylene.
Okay, we can look more into it. We're not at a final stage, but if there's specific items on there that we need to address, we're definitely open to that.
Yeah, and again, you know, my concern would be that, well, you know, we're not going to add polypropylene because we think some facilities are optically sorting with support and others aren't, and we don't know who's who. You know, that becomes even more tangled, you know. So, yeah, if it's 75%, it's 75%, and then the market conditions, if they're making a bale and selling it, it's getting recycled, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Well, and if there's more facilities that are sorting it, that would be great. But CalRecycle, I think for 2019, only recorded 2 facilities that actually claimed number 5 as CRV. And I think it was less than 10,000 pounds statewide.
Yeah,
so,
I believe that. I'm sure there's a lot of polypropylene CRV out there.
Commissioner Ward had a comment.
Just quickly, I just wanted to highlight the equipment supply to all areas is a good general principle, but it's something we should be aware of, that anybody who's looking at any kind of recovery is always going to be looking at where is the most cost-effective place to put our resources. And we're just seeing time and time again, the rural areas just don't have the resources, don't have the flow of materials, and sometimes those choices make sense, such as cartons not accumulating at a rate that we can actually get the bales to the market so that they're usable. Other situations, maybe, and the optical sorter may not be the equipment. So I think what we have here is a situation where the urban areas and the more populous areas have real reliable lists of things that are recyclable, and then possibly using the same structure of a slightly different list in other areas. But I just wanted to highlight that the choices, whether it's an EPR program or any other program, the manufacturers are forking out the money for the equipment are going to try to do that in a way that meets the goals they're required to meet. So I applaud the idea of everybody should have access to the equipment, but also recognize that there's going to be arguing about saying, well, you know, could we spend a little less and target a little bit more of the materials, and that those definitions are really important.
I missed Commissioner Lapis, maybe.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we include John's correction, because it sounds like just a factual change that would actually end up having a huge impact on a specific material type. I haven't done the math, but if John is right and changing Bertec, you know, bumps for not for bottles, but for rigids, for polypropylene rigids, if that bumps them above 75%, then they belong on the list. I mean, we set objective criteria and people either meet or don't meet them.
Okay.
And I'll just say that John isn't the only one who's flagged that. I've had other MRF operators in Southern California reach out and say, hey, why aren't polypropylene tubs and other rigids on the list?
Robocop, are you flagging to speak?
No, I just agree. I agree. The survey that I took was above 75% as well.
Okay. That's important, because if we're making decisions based on bad data, and I've had multiple people tell me that they've asked multiple times to understand the data that we're pulling from, and we don't have that posted really yet. So Commissioner Ward, can you work with Commissioner Donlevy and make sure that gets up today so we can make sure everybody can see it? And if we have other corrections, you know, it's obviously very important to all of us that we have this right.
Commissioner Donlevy has already emailed me a copy. If that hasn't changed, then I can upload that. Is that okay to upload?
Yeah, yeah.
It hasn't changed from where it was, Mr. Donlevy?
Let me send you what I think is the final as of today.
Excellent, and I'll upload that.
Let's make sure all these documents are dated so people know when they were uploaded, and we do too when we look at them in case things get outdated and we got to correct them. Thank you. Awesome. The only thing I had, I see, Commissioner Medrano, did you want to say something?
Just a question on the density-based processing payment. It almost seems like that payment program is already somewhat confusing and cumbersome for processors and for transporters of some of the CRV material. Wouldn't this overcomplicate things a lot more? Or perhaps I'm not understanding how this what this proposal will be.
Yeah, a density-based processing payment, our program is very complicated. It would complicate it a little bit more, but it would give CalRecycle the ability to look at the processing payments, and where you have operators that are in very underserved areas, but they're serving a lot of people. The Bay Area is the easiest place to give an example. They're getting the same processing payments as Bakersfield or Van Nuys. Provide a higher processing payment to the operators that are in these underserved areas that are serving a lot of residents. And it also provides an incentive for people to open up new recycling centers in those areas. So it would be a carrot in those high density areas that are underserved. You might look at a similar area west of the 405 in Southern California, underserved area. But if those targeted areas had a higher processing fee, it might attract recyclers to open up in those locations.
Commissioner Dell, did you have a comment?
Right. We need to clarify something on the spreadsheet. There are 7 criteria because that's what's in the law that we are going by. And CalRecycle may not be using that approach. So to compare this to approach CalRecycle's using isn't valid. We're using the law that we all agreed on that have 7 criteria. That's the approach. Second point, because a MRF accepts a plastic or a paper or a metal does not mean it's getting recycled. Because it's on an acceptance list does not equal a bale is made and a bale is sold. And in fact, we have a long list of media articles that saying a lot of items are getting collected and going to landfill because there are no buyers for it. Third point, a lot of plastics, 3 through 7s, have been collected in mixed bales and are still being exported ahead of the Basel restrictions, which will stop that. So the idea that just acceptance by MRFs makes something recyclable defeats the 6 months or 5 months of work that we've been doing here. And we really have to use a fact-based approach. Is it separated? Is someone buying it? And on polypropylene, the last I heard, no one has bought polypropylene in California since May. And if someone would like to correct that, go ahead and do it. But there's 7 criteria for a reason. And we have to be clear, just because a MRF is accepting it doesn't mean it's getting.
Commissioner, just a quick comment. Yeah, since May, the market for polypropylene has been very challenging. Some people that were under contract, it's my understanding they were able to move their material. Those that are not under contract, it was very challenging to move that material. And if it was a mixed bottle and rigid, I think that material is still sitting. If it's just a clean CRV bottle mix of number 5, I think that is moving. But I don't think it's a very stable market. I mean, the domestic market is very limited. I only know of one domestic buyer at this point, and the export markets, as you pointed out, are going to be changing come January 1st. So there's a lot of support for PP to keep it as a recyclable item, but I'm with you that I don't think that the overall health of recycling that commodity is strong enough to keep it on the list. But with Commissioner Davis and Commissioner Lapis, let's look at it a little bit more. So when we have the discussion on December 2nd, we might be in a position where we could finalize the recommendation.
Okay. Well, again, your committee's done a ton of work. We've discussed these concepts and several times, I think, and every time there's a little more feedback. So with getting up that document and having everybody really look at this and coming back with real hard language for each of the recommendations from the recycling committee, I think we could be on track to at least get some of them into that report for January 1st, depending on how the discussions go December 2nd. So is there anything else on your committee, Jeff, you want to talk about?
No, and I think with the list of what's recyclable, if programs are able to reset and simplify them, it's going to promote quality and help get material actually recycled. And like I said at the start of the commission, it's setting up good recycling programs, not diversion programs, having to address the diversion issue where city or county staff is so focused on diversion. The question for them is, we need to make sure that the material is actually getting recycled, and get them focused on that, because that's going to be the long-term health of all the recycling programs, and not just focus on diversion, because if it's getting landfilled or something else is happening to it someplace else in the world, that's not good. Right now, with Basel Amendment, there's a lot of plastic facilities that are starting to open up in Mexico. And the question is, labor rates down there are definitely cheaper than in the U.S. Environmental regulations, I'm not sure, are as strong as what we have in the U.S. But it just seems that there are plastic facilities that were in China, that were in Indonesia or Malaysia, that have said that they're going to be looking at setting up shop in Mexico. So are we playing whack-a-mole and moving the problem from China to Indonesia, now into Mexico? So we got to be aware of that. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we don't want to end up with the same problem without due diligence and making sure it is truly getting recycled. Well, thank you all again for the great work of this committee. And again, I think the bulk of a lot of the work that's coming right now is between now and the next meeting, and getting everything into that report for the first reading, and then the second and final reading on December 16th before it goes over to the legislature, Cal Recycle, Cal EPA, et cetera. So thank you to everybody, especially with the holidays in the middle. Okay, is there anything else on Recycling Committee? I think we're good to move on maybe to Labeling and Public Education with Chair Jan Dell.
Right. So this will be quick. We're on hold waiting for the Recycling Committee to finalize what is recyclable, and the Composting Committee to finalize what is compostable, in order to bring back up the overarching labeling system discussion that we have tabled at the commission level, because that discussion needs to wait until we finalize this list. Certainly, and if the composting one's going to get done, that's great, because then we can bring all of this together and have a big session when those two lists are finalized on how would we like to label products, bins, and acceptance lists. And other than that, we're waiting for Cal Recycle to give us an update of when they'd like to give us the next update on their public outreach.
There's no feedback to them. There's nothing to give them feedback on yet on that campaign.
We've continuously given them feedback.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, we've continuously in meetings.
Okay, great. Is there anything on that you want to share with us as far as any recommendations you're giving them, or have we seen all that?
Nothing. That's nothing in particular. That's low priority. They're just at the beginning. They're still at the beginning of setting up the consultant, and COVID has delayed the schedule, because a lot of it was going to be in-person outreach and talking with communities, talking with both government and people, and interacting. We've encouraged them to use all the material and research that the Recycling Partnership has done, and all of their research that 52% of Californians think that all these prime bags should go in their recycle bin, which is not a good thing. And so Cal Recycle is really still at the beginning of launching and doing groundworking and ground truthing on what people understand, and also looking at some other systems of what worked with educating people.
Great, thank you. All right, well then I think unless there's any other comments, does somebody want to give any feedback, Commissioner Dell, or ask a question? Okay, then I think we're done with agenda item number 7, which means we're an hour early and that we have a lot of work to do. So I'm sure if we end early, nobody would be upset about it. So agenda item 8 is actually agenda items for future meetings. And again, we were starting to discuss that David Alloway from the Department of Environmental Quality in Oregon has agreed to come speak to us per your request at the next committee meeting. And because we only have 2 commission meetings left before we submit those first recommendations, I wanted to ask you before we set the schedule, how long would you like that presentation to be? He was suggesting to me it would be very hard to have a thoughtful review and discussion and Q&A in less than an hour. But that chews up an entire hour of a 4-hour meeting that is our last chance at first reading. So we might need a longer meeting, or we might need a another meeting. I don't know. I just wanted to throw it out to everybody for suggestions before we set it. So none of you are mad at me that we go for 5-hour meetings without any heads up. Any thoughts on that, Commissioner Lapis? Or Commissioner Ward, I'm sorry, I guess you're first. Oh no, Manuel, sorry. You're zipping in there.
Yeah, I think since time is of the essence, we didn't really get to vote on a lot of anything today. I think we should perhaps push David to the following year, to 2021, and focus the next meetings on getting our recommendations solid and ready for a reading.
Commissioner Ward?
Yes, I think Mr. Alloway has a lot of information that would be useful to the commission, and I don't disagree that maybe it might be better to push it until after January so that we can benefit from being able to focus on this discussion, because he'll provide a long overview about how Oregon developed their pretty comprehensive materials policy, and we're kind of being thrown into the frying pan as volunteers to try to come up with the same sort of thing. And we're just not going to be able to match the level of professional quality or the level of attention that they've already poured into what they've come up with. And I think we can benefit from that, but we got to be able to pay attention to it. So I think maybe delaying it until afterwards, if we're not going to include any of these big overarching vision things, maybe delay is the right thing in this case. But he has a lot of important things to say that I think we could all benefit from.
Commissioner Lapis?
Sorry, I don't think it makes sense to wait until next year, since he's going to be talking to us specifically about the recommendations that their recycling committee came up with. It would just be very odd for us to make similar recommendations without having heard the reasoning for the ones that they, made in Oregon and the discussions that went into that. And, I think a lot of them overlap in terms of issue areas. So I would definitely like to hear it before we have any recommendations, including preliminary recommendations. I would suggest that we could speed up the process significantly if everybody committed to reading their recommendations before the meeting. We get a lot of documents, but if this could be highlighted as must read, I think that would allow us to do it in less than an hour.
Thank you. Commissioner Ryan?
Thank you, Chair Sanborn. I just wanted to report out 2 things. I was just in a hearing with Susan Collins on the Select Committee on Waste Reduction and Recycling and Natural Resources. Assemblymember Eggman and several other members were on that call. They mentioned our commission at least 4 times in the short time that I was on that call. I think there's a lot of expectation from those assembly members of that committee on the outcomes that we're going to bring forward. That was very clear from what I just heard. And they are grasping for answers just like we are around global warming, the future of plastics, how do we reduce the waste stream, but simultaneously do it in a thoughtful way so that we don't blame the consumer for all of the problems that the manufacturers are creating for our waste stream, and we're not holding them accountable and making them pay their fair share. Instead, we hammer our residents and tell them that they're not doing a good job because they're throwing everything into the recycling container. And so we have to rearrange our priorities. So I like what's coming out of the recycling committee specifically because we're going to narrow the field and say this is the harsh reality of our current industry. The other element is I think we need to be very careful and thoughtful about what we're going to put forward. So if we need to take more time to do a more thoughtful and thorough job of vetting these things and speaking to everybody we can, I'm in favor of doing that because, again, there are high expectations coming out or expected from whatever we put forward. So just food for thought.
I agree. I've heard the same thing. Commissioner Sky?
I certainly want to echo Vice Chair Valle about the need to take the right time, and I think Commissioner Lapis pointed this out that I think it would be helpful. I know searching through the Google is now like an ecosystem with so many different documents is a little bit tougher. If we could have an email that says these are the documents that are really critical for us to review as we approach what might be our last meeting to get the final documents in the January report, I think that would be important. And then commit the right time. And I don't know if that means extending the meeting time a little bit more or having, maybe banking an additional meeting day for any additional discussions that do take us over so that we don't rush them. That might be warranted as we get close to the deadline.
Well, we've had pretty much the whole gamut of thinking on this. So I think I'll just make a proposal and see if we can agree on this. So we know this is very important what we're doing and that people are looking for it and legislators are looking for it. And we all want it to be right and be something that we can all be proud of if they put into a bill. So to that end, I think if we don't hear what Oregon has done, and Commissioner Lapis, maybe you can share with us the differences between how these two groups have been set up. Our group is volunteers. We're going fast and hard as we can with some support from Cal Recycle, but obviously they have limited staff. There was no funding in this bill. I don't know how Oregon's was set up. I'm not sure if they had a whole bunch of resources that maybe they were able to do a deeper dive on some of these things, but do you know anything about that, Commissioner Lapis? I don't. I haven't researched that part of it.
I don't. I actually thought it was fairly similar to our structure, but I don't know that for a fact.
I think they've had more time. I think they've been working on it for a lot longer.
They've definitely had more time.
Yeah, it's been 2 years. It's been 2 years, and I think it was managed by the DEQ. So,
right. So they had.
And in all fairness, and not in the middle of a COVID pandemic. They started.
Right. So they're ahead of us. They're ahead of us, and they're our neighbors. And it seems to me, and we've talked about working together on the West Coast, that it would be a really missed opportunity before we submit our first recommendations to not hear from them, because what if we aren't aligning our policy recommendations with a group that's had 2 years to digest this and come forward with theirs? I mean, maybe we're missing something. So I guess I would be afraid not to have this presentation, but I agree with Nick. There's a lot we can do in homework to make sure that we're prepared to ask questions. If he gives us a PowerPoint and some documents, that we can have a commit as a group to go through that in advance and let him do a very brief overview, and then we can get right into questions and also comments from the public. So that would be my recommendation, is and to have it be an hour on the next agenda. Is that okay? Thumbs up? Or does anybody think that's not a good idea? Thumbs up? Okay. All right.
And what about Kobe's suggestion of having another meeting scheduled that we could cancel?
Yes. So thumbs up to, yes, we're going to do an hour with David Allaway, but we'll get the materials in advance. And then for another meeting, because I was thinking that too, I'm concerned that on the very last meeting, we're going to run out of time and want more. So we either add it to that meeting or we do it maybe a few days after or the day after to give ourselves a break, because these are very long 4-hour meetings. So I guess it's up to you. Is everybody, I'm certainly, I mean, there's no holiday for me. I'm not going anywhere. COVID, so I'm around until the 24th, I think, is when everybody takes their holiday. It's up to you guys. Suggestions on a day to just have as a backup? We could do maybe, I think a lot of people will take the whole week of Christmas holiday off, or Hanukkah, whatever you celebrate. And so we could do the 18th, that Friday the 18th, before everybody leaves in the morning, just in case as a backup. We need that extra time, but we can also cancel it if we don't need it. Does that sound okay?
Friday the 18th is also a recycling committee meeting. Chairperson Sanborn. At 1.
Those people would end up with a back-to-back. But it's also, you could make it commission day.
Why don't we cancel the
We do have Dave.
the recycling committee meeting?
Yeah, I agree.
So if we cancel the recycling committee meeting for that Friday and we just book another 4-hour block, we can always use less, but at least it's there, because if we don't publicly notice it, we can't do it.
Right.
In the morning, same time, same bat channel, 8:30 to 12:30.
So just
Okay.
merging the two.
Well, we could do that too. We could notice it as recycling and commission meeting, but then that would really be because we would all watch the recycling committee with the final recommendations. But again, at that late hour, first readings aren't going to make it into this report. It would only be the stuff where the commission's already heard. So I don't think there's a benefit, but to me, I'm not seeing a benefit to having the committee meeting that day, at least for
Right.
January.
I think just one meeting would be better.
Yeah, I think we're all maxed out, yeah.
Overall.
Okay, so is there general agreement then? We're going to cancel the recycling committee on that Friday, and 8:30 to 12:30 hold Friday, December 18th, in case we need it to finalize our report and final recommendations submitted on the 1st. Thumbs up? Everybody good? Okay, any opposition? I don't see it. Okay, excellent. So that's the plan. So we'll capture that in the notes. That's very important. And we'll make sure CalRecycle takes that recycling committee date off the calendar and adds the commission meeting. And again, if we don't need it, that's great. We can all go to the holidays early. But if we do, it's there. The other agenda items. So we're going to keep the Basel Action Network on for the next agenda. So we'll keep the same order we had today. And instead of Assemblymember Eggman, it's going to be David Alloway, and we'll give him the hour at the beginning. I probably think it's best to put him before Basel Network discussion. So we'll put, if that's okay with you guys, we'll do David first, then Basel, then we'll go to Basel, and then we'll go to the policy recommendations and the report. Okay. Anything else on agendas, future agendas? And we have Jared Blumenfeld confirmed for 9 to 9:30 on the 16th.
Just a recommendation to everybody. I think we will get much more out of Mr. Alloway's presentation if you take the time to look at what Oregon has on their websites and the information they've developed. Really great background information to everything that we do. Whether you're on the recycling committee or any of the other ones, they've got something for you. So check it out.
Well, maybe what we could do, could you put that in the Google Docs?
The report
they have a lot of
the report is in Google Docs.
John, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, you're talking over. Yeah. So Ted, can
I was
we
going
put
to say
that?
the report is in Google Doc. Sorry, but just to clarify, there's a report and then there's background. So the report is in the Google Doc from our November 4th meeting. So you want to
That's right.
probably move that to be found. But Ted's talking about all the background information, which we just need a link to, I think, Ted.
the link in the Google Docs. Everybody.
I will send everybody a link to their documents and a brief introduction, and you can click on it if you'd like.
Yeah, thanks, John. I forgot that was in there. Okay. And then the other thing I put in there today, actually, I forgot to mention, was the Assembly Committee and Natural Resources and Subcommittee on Waste Reduction also had a meeting on Monday, and I took all the documents and the presentations from that meeting and put it into a file folder today for this meeting. So in case any of you didn't get a chance to see that or get those documents, you could look at those. So you know what the legislators are hearing. Okay, so with that, we will go ahead and move on to agenda item number 9, which is the meeting summary. So again, I think we covered a whole lot today. We got a lot of new information and some old information and tweaked some. And we all know that December 2nd, we're going to have a very busy meeting. So we'll have to all schedule time and block it before that committee meeting. And I would encourage the committee chairs, as soon as you've got documents done, please upload them. And everybody go look at the policy recommendations folder for the next commission meeting, I believe it would be, right? Ted, you're going to put them in there? So it's giving everybody enough time to digest it, look at it, and the public to look at it. Okay, great. Thank you. And then we've got a couple of requests of CalRecycle on some data that they can get us potentially. So we'll wait to hear from that and also wait to hear back from them. If we can ever get to the place where we can have two-way communication with the commenters, which I think we're going to need towards the end of these recommendations. Okay, well with that, I think we could break early. Everybody can have a nice lunch. Thank you all very much. You're doing an amazing job. Thumbs up to the team, the Just Do It Commission, and we'll look forward to seeing you December 2nd. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving holiday, everybody.